I'm Jonathan Dickinson.
I'm Inzunza.
And I'm Trevor Millar. And this is the Ambio Podcast.
Welcome you all.
Hey, welcome back.
How you guys doing today?
Good. Yeah.
I'm great. I'm in beautiful, I think north of Houston, Texas. The weather's incredible. There's a former client that we had who's invited me to a big party that his company puts on every year. So super excited to be here. And I think Amber and Marcus from Vets are going to be here as well. Another one of our therapists. So yeah, nice little break from Mexico.
Awesome. Enjoy your time there, Colonel, for sure. We have a rain here in Tijuana. So enjoy the sun.
Heard it was another rainstorm.
Yeah.
Right on.
So, well, we're excited. Last week we had our first guest, and really fascinating, powerful story.
It was.
Yeah. I was thinking about it all week. Just the strength of that transformation and the opportunity. Just grateful about the opportunity that we've had to be able to learn so much from people that have come through and the healing that they experience. And it just reminds me very often that sort of feels like we're on a lot of different frontiers at the same time, you know, being able to see things that no one or few people have been able to see before. And then, you know, I think that's, last week we got to see the opportunity of this podcast was to be able to share those stories as well, so that, you know, more people are able to witness that, and we can try to understand what's going on.
Yeah, it's wild. We're really at the cutting edge, doing a lot of stuff that's never been done before. A lot of it accidentally. You know, we knew Ibogaine was incredible for treating opioid use disorder and other addictions, and now just to see all these different neurological ailments that it seems to be helping with, from TBI to what Marty was talking about last week, to what we're going to be talking about today. It's a real honor to be at this bleeding edge of this new frontier for sure.
Yeah. So you're away this week, tuning in remotely, but we are welcoming our first in-studio guest. So Chris Janney, welcome to the Ambio Podcast.
You guys.
We're really, really stoked that you're able to make the short trip down, and we're really excited about the conversation.
I'm equally as stoked, and I have a deep affinity for you guys. And just hearing you talk about being, you know, on the frontier, I've seen you as pioneers in an amazing way that I benefit from, and it's just it's great to be in your space.
Thank you so much for coming, Chris.
Seriously.
I think people is going to love to hear you, to hear your story and everything you have to share. So, yeah, amazing. So,
well, yeah, like I, was talking about Marty last week, who, if you haven't listened to that episode, I recommend that you do. It's a very powerful story, but your story is another one where I feel like we had an opportunity to learn a lot, and we got pushed to try to develop a new protocol in order to meet the goals that we set. And we got to see what works and what doesn't work, but through the process we're able to understand a lot more clearly and come up with much better questions.
Yeah. I mean, it's been an adventure for me. It's been expanding my frontiers and giving me a lot of hope and possibilities. Just so everyone understands, I've been dealing with neuropathic pain for the last 20 years from a motorcycle wreck that tore 3 nerves out of my spine and paralyzed most of my right arm, which has got some use, but it's 3.5 years of surgery just to be able to basically almost touch your nose. But the downside to that is this ongoing neuropathic pain.
Yeah. And that was 3.5 years of surgery
just to
20 years ago.
20 years ago, that's right, yeah. And I went with the best of the best. I mean, if I'd stayed with best doctors in Los Angeles where I was living, and I still do live, I would have amputated my arm. And I ended up basically traveling to find every best surgeon in the U.S., interviewed 5 total, who would give me the best options. And it's a rare injury. Usually when people have this injury, it's high velocity. It's a motorcycle accident, 70% of the population for adults that have this injury, or high velocity skiing, falling from a building, ATVs. But that component, usually people would be a quadriplegic. It's impact to the neck. So to survive that and then have these nerves torn out of the spine, it's a rare injury. People don't know what to do with, even the best neurosurgeons.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. And fortunately, I've got older brothers in the biotech world, and he immediately reached out to Christopher Reeves, neurosurgeon specialist at Rutgers University, Dr. Wise Young, who's one of the top of the field of regenerative medicine. And the response was basically, you're kind of fucked. You got to figure this out yourself. And my brother
Could we pause that there
course,
from you're
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of fucked and take a bunch of steps backward?
Sure.
First of all, knowing you as little as I do, but as well as I do at the same time, the fact that you have been able to survive everything that you've been through is quite astounding. So I think you're a kind of a unique person in the first place. Could you maybe take us back to before the accident? What was life like? How was it? How did you grow up? All of that.
So yeah, I grew up in New England, biculturally. My mom is from the Dominican Republic. My dad's a gringo, blue-eyed, blonde hair, but old sort of Mayflower stock, and lived in Mexico City as a kid. For a year, my first language was Spanish, because my dad I think he was working on his thesis there from Harvard, so a smart dude, married to an intense Dominican, which is an adventure in its own. But as you're listening to you guys talking in the beginning, I was thinking of the frontiers sort of mindset for what a frontiersman does. And I had a sort of flashback to moments of childhood, me doing things that were adventurous, and me being involved with you guys was an adventure. We were dropping off my godmother, my mom's sister, at the airport in Boston. And it's a 2.5 hour drive back up to New Hampshire where I grew up. And I was 4 years old. So I just moved to the U.S. from Mexico, and I was asleep. I missed saying goodbye to her. And they only told me this as we're driving out of the airport, just pulling out and about to hop on the freeway and go north. And without anyone noticing, I've got 2 older brothers and a younger sister, my parents, in this old Jeep Wagoneer. I crawled out the side window while we're going 65 miles an hour up the freeway, got on the rooftop and was waving at the plane to say goodbye to her. And I did my good waves goodbye, and then thought I'd just play games with my family. I was just poking my hand down, crawling on the other side, poking my hand down. And it wasn't until someone was honking at my dad. He was like, "Where the hell's Chris?" And one of my brothers saw my hands come down. Just thinking of what allows people to take risks and what risks are healthy and not healthy, and the willingness to, is it in your mind a risk or not? And there's some slight continuation of that throughout my life. Having 2 older brothers, kind of thing. Being the youngest of 3, you learn to wrestle your way out of things or get smart about it. But as far as going, I don't think you guys want me to go that far back, but it perked up when you guys were talking about being, frontiers mindset. What does that evoke? Was that there in childhood, or was it not? There's some relevance to that, because even in the context of me getting in a motorcycle accident, I was raised in a medical community, Dartmouth College. My dad was a professor up there in New Hampshire. He called them murder cycles. I grew up riding horseback, donor cycles. It was known to not ride a motorcycle. I wasn't allowed to actually get on them as a kid. So that context of me, then as soon as I turned 18, getting on a bike, was this a self-imposed wish? Was it something that I disobeyed the greater intelligence and brought this on my own self? That's when I started actually looking back, no, actually I've been an adventurer to a certain degree my whole life. And
I mean, with your story and knowing you're the person that I know probably who has the strongest and most acute experience with pain.
Yeah, so that my history on that. I mean, it was like, I was injured in December 2015.
Could you take us through the accident itself?
Yeah, sure. So,
Or was that the first kind of experience with pain that?
no. So I wrote an article about pain because I did clinical trials at Stanford like 5 years after my accident. And doing that, I kind of went through my head like all the different times. So I got jumped by a gang in Venice, California when I was 21. I'd been living there for 6 months. The cops said in the end they think it was a gang initiation because it started off with like 3 young kids coming at me. And I was like 235 pounds, pretty solid muscle. I was playing rugby. I was 21, wearing steel-toe biker boots with 2-inch heels and a horsehide leather jacket. I was like, well, why are you coming at me? And I started speaking Spanish to them. They kind of freaked them out. Anyway, they jumped me. Like 15 more guys came around the backside and all surrounded me and my buddy. And I actually didn't feel threatened. I was in a very public space. And it was when I actually never threw a punch. I was just blocking punches coming at me. When I threw a kid down, when he was getting up, I saw in his hand he had a knife. And he kept on staring at my midsection. And as he got up and stared at my face, my midsection, so I looked down. And my green T-shirt had a puffy section in the midsection. And I lifted it up, and I had intestines hanging on my stomach. And I had no idea. I was like, what the fuck? That whole experience, so in that context, it keeps on going and going. The story gets wilder and wilder, but the end result is I wake up in the morning. They had to remove half my liver because the knife had gone through my stomach and my liver, and it has knifed 4 other times. My buddy I was with knifed in the chest. Actually, this story's wild. A nurse actually broke my nose trying to administer the breather tube before the surgery happened. But the point was when I got out of surgery, I was in between jobs and didn't have health insurance. And the first thing I said was, what's in my arm? Do I need this? Like, they wanted me to get a little toothbrush kit to wash my teeth. And I was like, no, whatever it costs anything, I don't want it. Like, can you take this out? Like, well, you take everything, we're not going to take the morphine. You need the morphine. I was like, no, how much per,
Just because you were worried about how much it was?
Yeah, and it was like $60 for every 30 minutes, I think it was like something like that. And I just like, all right, get it gone. Like, no, we can't. I was like, get it gone. And I had 32 staples down my stomach. They just closed me up. They removed it, and frankly, I was actually like, I can tolerate this. It's not a problem. And going back further in my pain introduction, at like 12 years old, I think I was alone watching a National Geographic type show. And they're showing like Hindus, other different forms, other religions, other cultures, that they would do body piercings. And I was transfixed that these guys were doing this, putting rods through their cheeks without like screaming in their eyes. And just out of complete curiosity, I took a sewing needle on my mom's little desk next door and just kind of picked a pore on my bicep and just tried. I was kind of like, and then actually it was okay. It popped in, and actually popped it through. And I was like, through my bicep. Okay. And I did that. I only did it then once until I started drinking beers when I was like 14, 15 and impressed someone, trying to impress someone. And that context, I've always been capable and able of relative control of pain. I mean, it's different when you're doing it to yourself. If someone was doing it to me, I wouldn't allow it. It wouldn't be possible. But I was doing it to myself. And it was really, I just stayed curious.
At that point, you were seeing the pain as the limit?
The pain, that was testing, yeah. So that's part of, sort of childhood. I was bullied by my oldest brother's best friend. And, grass burns on my face. And, like, whenever he would see me, he'd just be like beating the hell out of me. And the biggest hardship in that, I'm talking 5 years old to 8 years old, that I couldn't fight back. Like and I would tolerate the pain, but actually the deepest pain was the inability to actually be in control. And so I've looked at that just for my own curiosity, like that relationship with pain, because I became a bit of a daredevil, but I think we made the context of the relationship to pain. It was a way, I think, for me, it was a form of control. Like, people like borderline personality disorder, which I don't have, but they'll self-cut. Cutters cutting themselves so they could actually be in control of pain in that context, that relationship, which is a fascinating, my relationship to pain has been a long journey. And it's been, because I've had it for so long, which I can explain a little bit more, but I tried to see if it was a superpower, like how can I take advantage of this? Is there a way I can learn from this? Everyone wants to learn from the things that fuck them up. Mm-hmm. But then there's limits. Yeah. So what I learned with sort of control of pain, I had an ex-girlfriend who was had borderline personality disorder when I was like 24 to 29. And I tried curing her and helping her, but one of the things that she did, which was shocking, which I found out, is she cut herself. I looked into borderline personality disorder and the reasons why. It didn't make sense, but this relationship with, if they could administer pain, then it was they have control over pain, and they have psychic pain that's messing with them, and it's very tough to watch because you see someone. I felt it was like they're driving this Ferrari, but the linkage to the wheels doesn't work between the steering wheel, and they don't realize it, but they just keep on smashing into stuff, and it's like you're in the back seat. It's like, oh, slow down. Anyway, but that relationship within myself. I think, when I look back at it, I think me being a tough kid was a response to being bullied as a kid. And I was also the bully against bullies. Like, as I grew up and I was always bigger than other kids, like if I saw someone getting bullied, I would just shut it down fast, which is a reactive way for me to feel in control, I think.
So you think like when you were like not by cutting, but in other ways when you're experimenting with pain or risk, it was a element of control.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a bridge or a cliff or a rock quarry, because I grew up in New England in the mountains. I wouldn't jump off of to prove that I could do it, and that sort of taking a risk. But it didn't feel out of control. I mean, it always felt like I felt very secure in my abilities doing that. But it's people get attention and things like that. I was trying to be seen, things like that. But I at one point when I cataloged my own history of relationship to pain, I was like writing this article for United Brachial Plexus Network, a nonprofit that I'm involved with now. But they asked me to write an article for pain because I did these clinical trials at Stanford, which I'll get into, for real-time MRI machine function that you're in, and you're actually seeing your brain and the pain regions, and you can learn to control it. But when I wrote this article, I realized I'd broken 26 bones. And when I was 19...
One at a time, kind of like...
some like motorcycle wreck, I broke like 5 at that one point. Some from sports, some breaking 2 at once. Wow. Broke my nose like 5 times playing like rugby and things like that. But... and actually, so in my pain history, I got shot when I was 19 through the foot. Unfortunately, it was by myself. My friend handed me a gun. The safety was on. I put the pistol down by my side. We were at my grandfather's farm in South Carolina, and I had keys in my left pocket, and the trigger hit the keys. The safety must have not been put on all the way, or whatever happened, but the bullet went right over my knee and like cut through the skin to the center of my foot. And I never for a second thought that I was actually shot. I mean, it felt like a sledgehammer kind of hit my foot, but I didn't think that was actually a bullet. And I know you guys treat a lot of vets, and I'm sure they can confirm the relationship to experience like that. But in that sense, I was so shame-ridden because I grew up hunting, and gun safety was like top. Like, you just don't mess around. My granddad would smack you in the back of the head if you... Basics, exactly. But so I was like, we're not going to the hospital, because then this will be recorded. This will be like, then it's going to, it's a gun wound. And you're like,
how old were you?
I was 19 with 4 other buddies from college. It was our spring.
Did it just went straight through your foot?
Luckily, it did go straight through my foot. And I actually just got drunk for 4 days and smoked some weed. And then when I went back to college, I went to the school medic sort of the clinic at college. The attending physician comes back with the x-ray after he sees it, and he puts it up on the light board, and he goes, okay, so you see that ring right here, right around where the nail went through your foot that you said? It's like, when I was a medic in Vietnam, that looked exactly like bullet wounds. I was like, it was like a galvanized nail that went through, and I couldn't pull it off, and it must be the shrapnel from that. He was like, well, you're lucky it didn't hit a bone. It literally went right between the bones.
Yeah, I was going to think it shattered.
So just tissue.
You got lucky.
Very lucky. So someone's been watching after. I mean, I don't know.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say that, man. Yeah, for sure, you got somebody watching. Yeah.
Yeah. And when I got jumped by the gang, I was 21. And then when I was 24, I had bladder cancer. I was visiting an ex-girlfriend for her birthday, just say hello and having a glass of wine with her and her best friend. And as I was going to the bathroom, holding my glass of red wine, it was like middle of the afternoon, like a Friday. I'm peeing and my piss is like the same color as the wine, like dark red. I was like, what? And I thought for a second, I was like, I mean, I had never done psychedelics at that point. All right, yeah, mushrooms maybe. But anyway, I was like, what is going on? I mean, am I having some sort of trip or something? I stopped the peeing. I put the glass down. I started peeing again. Long and short of it is I had bladder cancer. They were able to get it out, scope it out with any chemotherapy treatments or anything like that. It's a very small tumor that was essentially, they said, dried up in the bladder and it started bleeding. So they could laser it out. But they had to check me every 6 months with a scope. And that scope's about the size of your pinky. And there's no real Novocaine. They put a little topographical Novocaine on the tip of your urethra. They slide that thing up in the, through the sphincter muscle into the bladder, then up another sphincter muscle to your kidney to see if anything's okay. And every 6 months doing that for 10 years was like
10 years.
Oh my God, Chris.
because that's what I needed for insurance. Insurance wouldn't cover me for the first 5 years unless I couldn't get self-insurance, so I'd get through work luckily. But they changed the bar right when I was about to get insurance again, like on my own if I needed it, to 10 years. And it was every 6 months for 10 years. And I had an ex-girlfriend who was there with her from New Zealand, country girl. She actually birthed her two younger brothers with her mom. She was like 13, 14, like kind of hippies living in a bus in the mountains. And she would always say like how women, they experience the most pain. And I was like, maybe, but I don't know. I'm not exactly sure. I didn't have my injury back then, but I made her come to one of the scopings just to like see the pain I endure, like what I'm, my face and everything like that. And I asked the urologist, said, sure, fine. She came in, she could not. She was like vetching, watching it happen. And just a little revenge and pain content. But so the history of pain, which I end up using, when I did the cataloging for this article.
So how were you navigating pain then?
It was always temporary. So that was, when I had my accident, this is a quote I used to always actually say. This was something I kind of came up with, I think, when I started like poking a needle through my arm just to test myself. And it was a way to endure. I was like, pain's only temporary. Just so I could also put a window on it. Whenever I experience something that might be painful, either breaking an arm or a leg, whatever, blah, 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 it's always got a window. And that window made it tolerable.
So did you have to kind of like, like clench or whatever? Or was it something where you could just let it wash over you, but just knowing that it was going to pass was enough? I
think it was a matter of, I perceived it as will against. I didn't mature, since my injury, I matured into, you can't fight this. You got to be at peace with it. You have to let it come through and over you. But beforehand, it was like, I will clench down and I will, or I will focus on it in the sense of like, kind of like integrating into it. Look at it and go, what are you? What are you? And it never felt that challenging. I mean, sure, things can hurt, but that phrase though, bit me in the ass. Max used to say after my injury, and I was like, getting out of the hospital for being a month in the hospital, she would say, pain's only temporary, I thought. And I was like,
so I think big part is you were accepting pain since.
Yeah, but it was temporary though. I mean, I could accept it because it had a limit to it. It's like, how do I'd never experienced anything that was beyond, a month, broken bones. I had broken bones as a kid that I never knew. Like I would skip, algebra. I liked algebra. It was like a metrics class. I think it was sophomore year in high school or something. I didn't prepare, and so I just skipped it. But I had been skiing the week before, and I took a hard fall, and I was like, I'm just going to go to the hospital and get an X-ray on my shoulder just to see, to skip the basic. Say I went to the hospital because I had to. I came back with my arm in a sling, and I had actually fractured my collarbone. So luckily, I could tell Mrs. Anderson when she saw me in the hallway with the sling on. She said, "Chris, where are you?" Oh. Anyway, the context of I had broken bones that I didn't know that were broken. It's happened a few times. But these are hairline fractures too, so it's not like it's a compound fracture or something. Which
I broke my collarbone skiing, and it was pretty painful, but it was like
so that's a compound fracture. That's an intense break.
That was painful.
But they are temporary experiences of pain, and then you got to experience the permanent pain.
Yeah. So that's.
How old were you when that happened?
34.
34.
Now
Okay.
55.
Okay.
So could you describe the accident itself? Do you remember it?
Yeah. I don't actually remember the moment of impact, which is extremely. I've come to peace with that, but it was most sort of significant few seconds of your life, and to not recall it and exactly what happened, it's sort of a major game changer for me. I was like, what? Like, why can't I just know what's happened? I actually saw psychics and all sorts of interesting things. But I was staying at a friend's place. So skip to a few years afterwards, I was seeing a life coach, and she said, I'd say I'll pray to God, 4:00 in the morning, someone fucking stop this. Like, I got to figure this out, how to deal with this. And she said, how are you looking for God? I was like, I asked for questions and come to me. It's like, well, what, maybe if God was telling you something and you're not listening how he's telling to you, it is telling you. Like, are you listening to God? How has God been speaking to you that you haven't been aware of? So the night before my accident, when I went out, I was going to a friend's birthday, and I was going to spend the night in Manhattan Beach on the coast of South Los Angeles. I rode my motorcycle. My car engine had blown. I drove my girlfriend at the time 2 hours south on my 72 Chevy Suburban, blew out the engine on the way to the airport because her grandmother had just died on my birthday. And so her grandma she was from New Zealand. Her grandma was a pure Maori. And I was like, you have to go to her funeral. I don't care. We're making it happen. And on the way there, we limped into the airport, and she flew off. So that engine was toast. So I'm riding a motorcycle, and that night I went out. It started raining as soon as I pulled out of the garage on my motorcycle, and had a really beautiful BMW K12 RS, which at that time was the fastest production BMW ever made. And it was like they call it the jackalope, like it could convert into like a race bike or a touring bike. At any rate, it just was a work of art that I loved. And so I pulled the garage, it's raining. I'm like, okay, pull it back in the garage and call up my buddies, get back in the house. Like, I'm not going out tonight. I'm like, don't worry, it's fine. Okay, decide to stay in, then half hour later, rain stops. And like, all right, get back on the bike. This happens 3 times. The rain stops, get back on the bike. And then I decide, after the 4th time, I'm like, dude, you're not going out. And then I just got a little wig up my butt and said, I'm going out. No one's telling me what to do. Like, I'm going to go ride through the rain. It's fine. Everything was fine. It was the next morning that had the wreck happen. And we stayed up late that night. On the way home, it was actually, I was an actor at the time. I was going to a play, early dress rehearsal at 3 p.m., and which has some weird tie-ins because the name of the theater director, the theater producer, Silas Weir Mitchell. It's going to sound weird. I don't know how far I'll go down this rabbit hole, but Silas Weir Mitchell, which I found out later when I started looking into my injury and phantom limb pain. Silas Weir Mitchell's the name of the surgeon during the Civil War, who's considered, if you do Wikipedia, the father of neurology. He had amputated hundreds of Civil War soldiers. He worked in the Stump Clinic, I guess, like it was in Louisiana, basically a hospital that was for amputations. And he wrote a book called The Story of George Dedlow, I believe. But it's where the term phantom limb pain was coined in this short story book that he did with a pseudonym because he didn't want to be known for this. And this rabbit hole goes further. But the context of
you're like bypassing his wish.
It's crazy. So it's the Silas that was there's a friend of mine as a producer of this theater. That's his great grandfather.
No way.
Yeah, he actually has a theater company. I think it's called the Phantom Theater Company.
What?
So, and I didn't put this all together until I'm writing a biography for my situation. This is trippy. So, this Dutch group I met at a neuro conference in Amsterdam in 2019, they really liked me. Afterwards, they asked me, would you write? And I just became the president of the United Brachial Plexus Network, a nonprofit that deals with this injury, but also predominantly birth injuries that have the same injury at being birthed. The shoulder gets caught in the mother's pelvis, doctor extracts it, pulling on the baby's head. All of a sudden, paralysis, tears out the baby's nerves. And this is completely avoidable. This with the right training, it's about like.
You're saying that's a similar injury.
It's the same exact injury, but done differently.
And it's the one where normally it's only in high velocity collisions, but it also happens during childbirth.
So when I learned that, I literally was like, I think I just started crying. I was like, what? Like in babies? Luckily, they don't experience the extreme nerve pain that I do, or that adults usually experience, but that can be developed over time. So it's not that they're devoid of it. It can develop over time.
So what I'm hearing is like that whole, like if you're looking at signs from God or whatever, this whole experience was really an initiation into, to put it crudely, like a world of pain, but like you like really became where that became a big focus in your life after.
Yeah. So that's after the injury. So the injury happened, and I can get into Silas Rear Mitchell later and the parallels with phantom limb pain, because it's pretty fascinating. But injury happens on the way to the theater company at 3:00 in the afternoon.
And it was wet?
It was totally dry, sunny day. I felt a little tired. I had double breakfast that morning because I was sitting with a group of guys, and we ate, I think, at like noon, but I had like pancakes and a double cheeseburger. Whoops, I'm sorry. And like fries and like 2 glasses of OJ. And so that kind of got a bit of a food coma, I think. And at the area where I had the accident, I was going up an on-ramp to an elevated freeway just south of LAX airport. And it took me a while to figure out what probably happened. But going up the on-ramp, and there's like a little S-turn, and I'm looking over my shoulder to see if any cars are merging into my lane. And that's kind of like the last thing I remember. I looked over, I saw the S-turn, I said, that's probably a couple seconds away. I'm like, okay, all good. And that was it. Don't remember what happened. Next thing I waking up is, I think like 2 or 3 days later, Martin Luther King Hospital, which has since been closed because this place is such a wreck of a hospital, like a emergency room. Like I think my sister, I don't know how they got the information. My sister came in, my injured arm I was on a gurney in a hallway. My arm was hanging off the gurney, my paralyzed arm. Should be whatever. But then I'd broken 4 vertebrae in my neck, my scapula in a bunch of places. And luckily, every spinal specialist I've seen and either interviewed for the surgeries and stuff like that, knowing when I broke C1 in 2 places and C2 and 3, fractured them, like I should be quadriplegic. So that's I wouldn't. We never know what we can tolerate, obviously. And I'm not trying to. I don't think I could tolerate that. I just don't have the courage. That level of lack of sensation in the body, things like that. At any rate, it wasn't until a year later I found out, going through my mail, that I didn't open my mail for about a year plus because all the mail takes kind of like 2 hands to operate. I can, and I didn't touch using this arm pretty much for 5 years because the pain was so extreme. I had it in a sling. I'd sleep with a rubber glove on at nighttime. Something's called allodynia. You have a hypersensitivity to tactile touch. If there's like a fan or any kind of wind on it, and it's like your hand is in a pot of boiling acid or oil, and that's what it's like nonstop. You feel like there's gardening shears going through the center of your bones, like just cutting up them all the time. And it's like this roller coaster of, it goes up, and then there's like a baseline of like 5 or 6 level pain, which is equivalent to like a broken bone.
So when you woke up in the hospital 2 or 3 days later, was it at that level, or was that?
I was so doped up, I was so morphined out. And the real first consciousness I had was them trying to get me into the MRI machine to examine, basically image my neck and my shoulder and stuff, which they hadn't done yet. And my shoulder was so swollen, it was literally hitting the side of the MRI as they were gurning me in. I was like, I remember going into, I could feel like the heat of my breath as I get covered up, I was like, oh, no. And so they reversed me out, and they just doped me up some more. And then finally they got me into either a different machine or whatever, but they got the imaging in. But it was like the third day of real consciousness is when my brother told me that he had talked to Dr. Weiss Young at Rutgers University, or got the info from him, at least from someone else or whatever. But he's like, dude, we're fucked. We got to fix this ourselves. And I was like, what? He's like, this injury is like, I'm a DIY kind of person. It's part of it's self-taught through a lot of things, but it was probably the best thing I could have ever heard in that context with my injury.
Him telling you that.
Telling me that is him telling me we're fucked, but if we want to fix it, we got to fix it ourselves.
I see, okay.
It put me in the driver's seat. And that element was, amazingly discouraging, but knowing and being told by my brother, who I deeply trust and respect, he's a team player, so I'm not going to be alone. But it's also, luckily growing up in the environment I did, I had a lot of friends' parents that were physicians and things like that at Dartmouth College. I knew that they're humans, they're fallible humans. And while I deeply respect all medical professionals, always have, and I have but I also knew that they have limitations to a certain degree, which helped me out down the road with getting surgeries.
So you could hear what they were saying and not take it as biblical.
Exactly. I'd keep on asking questions. Which I'm surprised. I went through all my medical records, and years later, and I would say, oh my God, he captured every time I asked, like, when are we getting more imaging? And I'm like, whoa. At any rate, so that context, so I get in there, I'm in the hospital for a month, and trying to discern this whole time, like my arm is not moving, completely paralyzed for like 2-3 months. And the first movement was a finger twitch and a thumb twitch, slightest twitch movement. But the more I learned, as in this hospital for a month, the more I started really fearing for the worst. My right arm, which, the context of identity, I had never lost an arm wrestling match with my right arm since I was 15. And that was when I beat my oldest brother. And he's 6 years older than me. And I have arm wrestled every country I've ever traveled. Someone pulls me from across the bar. Me, arm wrestle now. I've gotten free legs of ham in Portugal for Christmas. In Greece, I've got hotel rooms or a motor scooter discount rate, just strange. And always even the state champion of California at Astro Burger and Santa Monica and Vine at 4 a.m. with friends. I was 26. He actually beat me. And then I was shocked, but I was totally drunk. And then he asked me what circuit I was on. And then he tells me, I'm like, well, I'm not on the circuit. What are you talking about? He's like, I'm the state champ of California. I was like, what? And I was like, you have to arm wrestle me now. And so I did again, and I beat him. And my secret weapon's always been my left arm too. So he did actually beat me, but I beat him back. So it feels like it sort of checked itself off. But the point is this relationship to my damn limb, for me to lose that was it just is.
So were they, when you were fearing for that, is it because the doctors were bringing up that as an option, or?
They just didn't know. They kept on saying, well, wait and see. We got as much imaging, you have to wait more time till the swelling stops. The MRIs weren't conclusive enough. Long and short, as I discovered, was that the really best way to see what's actually going on, how much damage has been done, is exploratory surgery going in. But then you've got to find someone who's adept and capable and has a belt of different procedures that they'll do, which the best place was the Mayo Clinic, which I ended up going to. And 2 other previous physicians I met up with or interviewed before I went to the Mayo, I told them I was going, one was afterward. I told them I was going to the Mayo. They had worked with them there, and they said, you're probably best going there. They're going to be the best options for the injury you have, the severity. And I saw a doc afterward, seeing the guys at the Mayo, and they gave me their sort of, this is what we think we would do if we think the injury's like this, or this, you have different options depending on the severity of the injury. And we're talking nerve transfers. Half my C7 nerve transferred over to my deltoid muscle. Both the calves, my legs, the sural nerve, which is a sensory nerve, from the back of my knee to my ankle. Those have been extracted as extra nerves for grafting. The innervate the bicep is 4 nerves from my ribs. 2 of them went into the bicep, then transferred a muscle from my gracilis muscle, my left leg, which is the smallest of the 7 muscles in your thigh, into my bicep as extra juice, just to give me more power, because they said the weight of your arm, you might want to try this out. And this is experimental surgeries. Whoa. It took me like 3 years to have insurance cover it. Like, I would not budge, because they were saying, you can't prove these are experimental. And I was like, what are you talking about? My arm's paralyzed, and it's not paralyzed anymore, or it's moving. Let's see, they did tendon transfers. My hand would not open up. It was like, it would open up. These fingers could open up, and that was it. And these would open up to here, but I could clench them. And so
you had strength.
Had strength to clench and hold something, which is pretty important. But I couldn't actually access it to get anything. My wrist was flail. So they actually took the gracilis muscle, they got my thigh, tagged it onto the end of my collarbone, went down at the bicep, behind the bicep, and then tied it into my wrist flexors, extenders. Because my wrist was flail, if you try and get your arm out to something, if you can't actually get the hand back, you can't actually use the fingers. So mechanically, my hand would, if I lower my arm, my wrist would pop open, so I could actually get something. But after 9 months, had surgery at 4 months at the Mayo Clinic, at 4 months post-injury, which was kind of aggressive back then, but it's a tough injury, because you have to kind of wait to see what comes back, but you can only wait so many months, and then you're really losing possibilities of saving muscles down the road. And the mindset's always been beforehand, was just wait and see what regenerates, because innervating muscles with other nerve muscles means you're going to sacrifice something. It's always a sacrifice. It's a trade-off. Like, do you want a headlight or do you want a horn of your car? You've got 2 headlights, so it's probably best to take one of those headlights and use it for the horn in case someone cuts you off in traffic. That's basically what's going on. So, yeah.
And this whole time you're going from like 5 on the pain scale to 10, like you're going through that constant fluctuation along with these surgeries?
Yeah, so I was pretty doped up for 5 years on methadone, OxyContin, Neurontin, gabapentin, same thing, amitriptyline, some 13 meds total. And I was like, just give me more. I'm like, whatever nothing's working. Just give me more. And,
was amputation ever an option and a possible relief from the pain?
So it's not a relief from the pain, unfortunately. It can be a relief for the dead weight of the shoulder if you don't have shoulder function, which is what that C7 nerve transfer, or hemi C7 transfer to my deltoid, it gives me ability to maintain my shoulder. I mean, it's like it moves. It lets me run across the street to pay the parking meter without having to hold my arm in place.
But the pain is the result of the nerve being torn from the spine, yeah.
And then they say it's it's emanating from the spinal cord and that nerve damage there, but I'm interpreting it as it's happening in my hand, where that's the parallel phantom limb pain, where you've got phantom limb pain, a nerve is severed somewhere and the arm is a little distally amputated, and that stump, that nerve, can cause a neuroma. There's other ways it can try and cut that nerve to prevent it, but basically the nerve wants to connect to something. They have targeted muscle reinnervation, where they can take that nerve and plug it into, like, let's say, the pec. And this was discovered for functional robotics, where they would take these nerves and plug it into a different muscle, like the pec or shoulder. So you would flex the hand, or think of doing that. That muscle would flex, and they put a sensor on there, and so then the limb could articulate that movement.
Oh, wow.
And from doing that, which is amazing, 2 months afterward, 3 months afterward, these guys going, my phantom limb pain's all gone. They just kind of thought it was like, because you got this limb now, you got this other functional limb, the visual cortex overriding, saying, oh, he's got 2 hands now. That's what's going on. That's why it's working. And but there were guys that just didn't like the limb, didn't use it. All of a sudden, their pain was gone. So basically proving that the nerve just wants to connect to something. With me, those nerves are turned on the spine, and the spinal cord immediately sets up a barrier to prevent, it's the same as a spinal cord injury, prevent reconnection of those nerves. There's proteins in scar tissue that are immediately released. So one way to think of it is like an ingrown hair that's just like wanting to get out and connect to a muscle. So that the pain frequency, I didn't sleep for 20 years, essentially. You just don't sleep. I got a letter of a guy who's the CEO of a major insurance company, had his injury, about 18 years, same thing. He's effectively figured out a solution for his pain, but his letter was basically, I hadn't slept more than half an hour for 17 years, and I was on the way to Switzerland to the Gravitas Center to commit suicide. And he's like known in the business world. Anyway, that letter from him was so validating to me, because it's one of these components, like the injury's old. Why is this still going on? Like, it doesn't make sense that the body would still have this, incessant pain cycling, so in the sort of, to reverse back a little bit, like I really tried to, when I got off all the meds, which was a huge blessing.
And what sort of, they just weren't working and they won't give you any more, so you decided to just...
Oh, they would have kept on giving me as much as I wanted.
Oh, okay.
They were like, we know how horrible this nerve pain is. I mean, I was seeing one of the top pain specialists in sort of California. Luckily, he's my physician, and he was very willing to work with me. I was using ketamine, like gel on my hand, and put a glove on at night, just put like minimum amounts of ketamine into the system to try and see if that would work.
Did it help?
A little bit. It took a little bit of an edge off, but it was not enough to make it. I tried for probably like a year, but the biggest problem when I got off these meds.
I want to ask you, when do you cut off? Yeah, how do you cut off of these meds? Because now we're talking about withdrawing in real pain.
That's
how you deal with that? Pardon my language, was such a fucking head fuck. I mean,
I used to not be able to tell this story without sobbing out, which I'll get to in a little bit, because I was just like, the getting off of the methadone was a whole universe in itself. And when I learned only after trying Ibogaine with you guys, the potentiality of Ibogaine to help withdrawal from methadone, I was like, oh my God, please, can we help people with this shit? So I was getting probably on and off 5.5 years of surgeries, fine-tuning stuff, things like that. And I'd find myself having to stay with my brother for a bit because I was just kind of out of it, with the amount of medications I was on, plus dealing with the nerve pain. And frankly, it was just depressing as far. Depressing. But when I just made the decision to get off all the meds, I was like, this is not getting me anywhere. I just want to deal with the pain.
Did you just realize that you just want to stop?
Yeah, I had to get off of it. I was like, I had to get off it. And it was the gift of, with injuries like this that are rare, the online community, which is what saved me from getting amputation of my arm. I mean, if I didn't, online community, this website, unitedbrachialplexus.org, ubpn.org, had forums, and seeing other people running into the same problems. Like, my doctor doesn't want to give me an answer, like how much longer it's going to be. And someone say, I had surgery here, I had to go find doctors here. And it's harvesting of information, putting it back out there for others. Like, I had surgeries here, whatever, is to people stuck in the same, you just want to lessen the shorten the pain and suffering for anyone. And so that online community, especially consider a birth injury. You're about to give birth, you think everything's great, everything says it's great inside with the imaging of your baby. You give birth, your doctor's doing it, you have a breach and the shoulder gets caught, and often, unfortunately, the doctors won't admit what happened, which turns us into a real trauma-inducing situation where you've got trusting mother at your most vulnerable time in your life, giving birth. It's like, how can you be more vulnerable than that?
Plus the lack of answers from the doctors.
The lack of answers. They say, this happened inside. So they think that actually, that we have adults come and reach out to us in their 50s. They thought it was a congenital birth defect. They didn't think it was actually an injury that happened at birth. Like the ramifications that, and doctors want to fess up to it because it's litigious. You can go to court, which is what happens. And I've talked to so many parents that have gone through that, and I wouldn't have never taken him to court if he didn't lie about it. And then I found from when he lied about it, that he had 3 other cases in the past 2 years.
Oh, God.
And they've read his court testimony. It's the lawyer asks, well, don't you want to learn another birthing position, like how to do some other strategies? Like, I've already been trained. I'm fine. There's unique individuals. For the greatest part, my hat's always off to anyone in the medical profession, any caretaker. But there's just, like anywhere, it's going to be good cops and bad cops.
Of course.
But the context of the birth injury component, I don't know if I can backtrack or it's just a very relevant element of this injury. And the reason why I'm involved with this nonprofit, I was getting into the value of this online forums information. And it's something that the physicians don't generally want to share with you. I mean, if it's a birth injury component, who to talk to, things like that. But getting that information accessible for people that are in the triage state, they're just had found out now, or the baby was paralyzed a couple weeks later, they're trying to dig into what's going on. It's just the source of information. Yeah.
So basically that did help you to kind of realize that you probably had more options and you couldn't just stop medications and get back your life.
God bless I have a younger sister, Jessica, who, if you're out there, Jess, I love you. She was my champion through all this stuff. She went with me to all the physicians. She would sit there and read the website and the forum and get information back and forth. And I would kind of peek my head over the shoulder a little bit. I think it was at month 2 or 3. I was probably out of the hospital for like a month or 2. I decided to take a look at what was going on. I saw some forum discussion. Some guy had been 25 years in nerve pain. He was looking for resolve. He was like, it's only getting fucking worse. Like, I can't do this anymore. I literally just, I fell down on my knees sobbing. So I was like, no, like impossible. The level of pain from all the other stuff I experienced. So I used to remind myself, I'd say, dude, you've been shot, you've been stabbed, you had half your liver taken out, no painkillers, you had cancer in your bladder, you fucking scoped every 6 months. Like, pain, 26 bones. And just to reconfirm that I'm not psychotic, because it's an old injury. So I just to remind myself, like, okay, breathe deep, you got this. But when I read that online form at month 3, probably, post-injury, I was just like, it's impossible. There's no way that someone could endure this. And I've gone through, get down the journey of the things I've tried along the way. It was also a validator for me that I'm not crazy, that I've been through it, I know how to endure pain, and that I validate others that are experiencing this, because at some point it's mentally crippling, especially if you don't get sleep, which is the biggest byproduct. 20 years of not sleeping. Now I'm taking Adderall during the day just to stay awake. And as soon as that wears off, I want to pass out, but then you're not going to pass out because you're in pain. It's a catch-22.
So that injury was 21 years ago now?
Yes, 21 years ago. Yeah, it's 34.
So what did you try?
So all the medications, which are pretty much given to me.
You tried that and then you ditched them.
So there's 1.2 where it really was a ball and chain, the medication, because I was like, the withdrawals from that stuff and not having them. It was a year, oddly enough, I was getting my medication refill, and you have to go in every month because it was a different class of drugs, methadone. It was the 1 year anniversary of my injury, and I'm in the pain clinic. It's a newer doctor that had been my previous doctor, a younger guy. But I'm kind of morose. I'm going to the pain clinic. I'm going to the hospital. My year anniversary. I don't want to be there. And my sister and my mother are in town. My sister's living in town in LA, but they're with me because I don't even know if I drove for a while because I was just on heavy medications that you're not supposed to drive. But I think they just wanted to be with me for this, for whatever reason. I go in, they're in the waiting room. Doc asks me, he goes, how you doing? I'm like, oh, okay. And then he goes, you feel okay? I'm like, well, I really don't want to be here. And he goes, okay, well, are you depressed? I'm like, yeah, I think so. And like, are you doing anything about it? Yeah, sure, I'm trying different medications. Anything working? No, it's not working. He's like, you ever think about suicide? Yeah, sure. Well, who wouldn't? Do you have a plan for that? I was like, I plan everything. I have like 10 plans. He's like, hold on, I'll be back in a second. I basically checked off the 3 boxes that you have plans, you're thinking about it, whatever, and you're depressed. I'm a suicide watch. So he comes back in like 2 minutes, and my sister and my mom, and their faces are red, and they're like shaking, and they have to put me in the psych ward. And I was like, this is the year anniversary of my accident, dude. Like, if you do this, I'm going to jump to that freaking window. Like, don't do this. Don't do this today. Like, I'll come back tomorrow, but don't do this today. And just the obstacle course. And I totally get his position he was stuck in. But at that point, actually, I learned, I was like, okay, he was doing his job. He had to do this. Okay, I was being naive. But I've always liked being very honest. Like, wear your heart in your sleeve. It's, there's no reason to hide anything. But at this point, I was like, okay, just tell them the information they need to hear. It was like a form of maturity, I guess, that I understand and respect. But I just wish I guess he can't warn you and tell you these things. I just wish I'd known it beforehand, because it was just not what I want to happen. But the head of the psych department, Dr. Kruliski at USC for like 25 years, he interviewed me and said, "All right, dude, you're not supposed to be here. I can tell." And I was like, and the psych ward's full, by the way, so he can't put you in there. So I'm gonna get you a private bed, and I'm gonna set you up inside, and just say it's pain, and you'll be there. You get a private bed, just gonna be for just till tomorrow in the morning, or 20. I think it'll be 24 hours total, and then someone can take you home. But you're fine. And I saw him during those 5 years I was on medication. I tried like 13 different antidepressants, trying to deal with the pain. Some helpful for neuropathic pain, all these different things.
When you say they were helpful, is it because they're researched to be helpful, or they helped you?
No, they did not help. But they're considered to be helpful. Like they are for some. I mean, over the years, I've seen other people go through the melee of things, and some have been very helpful. Like Effexor was one. I was on that for roughly a year, but it's like it might give a little softening to some edge of it, but it's still the same. What I've learned is all that stuff. It can be like a tampering of the noise, but it's just cutting off the sharp edges, and that tampering then stops my capacity to actually be engaged with life, and nothing's worth that. I mean, that's when I got off all my meds, that was the biggest. I was actually my fire. So I was seeing a therapist, a life coach at the time, the one that asked me about God before I got off the meds, and she said to me, she said, "Chris." And I was a creative individual beforehand. I was in the theatrical arts as an actor, and I just signed a TV show. All sorts of stuff happened. And she said, "Chris, your pilot light has been blown out. Like you're on your water heater of like your life, your soul, and you're smothering from the gas of your own pilot light." And I just like started sobbing, because I was like, this lack of relationship with the outside world. I was not being creative. The medications were numbing my senses. And this is actually one of the things I do not want to forget with you guys in the context of my experience with Ibogaine and microdosing with it, is that all the different opiates I've tried and different nerve deadeners like Neurontin or gabapentin, which are for epileptics, but they're sort of GABA suppressors, or at any rate, everything has a side effect, at least from my experience, and intolerable. And life-changing when I got off them. But the microdosing, the Ibogaine, no side effects. And it was like there's no other. I was so headstrong to like find a way to get this available, to other. I was like, I'll create my own black market, just in the context of I know these guys suffering out there need this.
You mean too that it wasn't deadening that connection with life. Correct. And that motivation and drive to be engaged.
Brain. There wasn't a lack of. There wasn't a deadening. There wasn't like this filter that was happening.
And it still helped with the pain.
Yeah, it was which I can get into that experience, but it was a night and day difference. I mean, it was.
So was there anything, before you took the Ibogaine, was there anything that had worked at any point to reduce the pain? Nothing.
So the best I had experienced was 5 years after, 2000. Yeah, 5 years. Got off all the pain meds. I stayed with my brother. I went to pain clinic in Stanford for 2 months, going every single day for like 8 hours a day, learning ways to manage your pain, meditation, art, education.
They were just giving you tools to manage the pain,
which are great. I mean, I learned like substance P is a major neurotransmitter for pain in the system. And if I'm correct, I might be wrong, but I had learned there was a relationship between glucose and substance P, that substance P was glucose dependent. So I immediately then was like, no more glucose in my system. And I started researching this, like, man, I actually was trying to make chia seed drinks when there's only 2 books on Amazon.com about chia seeds. Now there's thousands. This is 2007. And I was like going to make, I want a food that would, anyway, that's a whole different story, but it's pretty amazing. And chia seeds basically lower your glucose intake because they bind in the gut and slow food process. But there's a huge history of chia seeds with Native Americans and Mayans, and like the people that walk straight.
Tarahumara.
Yeah. There's a Nike race in Angeles Crest Forest, 200 miles, I think. A guy came in this unknown, 54 years old, rubber sole shoes, handmade, And what he had, his little water satchel and a little satchel of chia seeds. He freaking kicked everyone's ass.
Yeah, esquierte, they call it. Chia fresca. We drink it all the time. Brianna makes it for us. Yeah, it's wonderful.
And it's it's transitioned into like indigenous, the indigenous cultures transitioned into the Catholic culture. These kind of marrying elements because of this cultural history, but it's huge. The cultural history of chia seeds is pretty amazing, phenomenal. So anyway, so back then at this pain clinic, I learned about glucose and context of substance P. I was just trying anything I could to be effectively modulated. And that's where I learned about meditation, started getting into that. And clinical trials at Stanford, December of 2000, I read about clinical trials happening at Stanford, real-time MRI machine, where you're in the MRI machine with 3D goggles on, and you're watching the blood flow in your brain real time with the areas of the brain highlight. There's 3 major areas for pain reception. And so you can see that real time. And
so it's sort of like neurofeedback. Like, is there something that you can do to modulate?
Neurofeedback. I think the machine itself is like a $5 million machine, and it just came out in the market right then. So Christopher Deschamps, who was the lead researcher, I know I'm going to butcher this, but he had like a double. He was like a mechanical, he was like a molecular biologist and then also an electrical engineer or something like that. This double interest. He studied with the Dalai Lama for like 2 years, majored in meditation. He's basically trying to find a way to increase the capacity to meditate, your own availability for this. And he was doing this with depression, with pain. He had like 6 different clinical trials going on. And his work ended up like front page of the New York Times, Time Magazine, the stuff that I did. And the first question he'd asked me when I get inside the machine. So before the holidays is happening, I'm now off of all drugs. I guess I should just mention the getting off the methadone thing. So I was staying with a brother in San Francisco, got off the tail end of the drugs when I was going to this clinic. And the methadone, getting off that was the worst experience I'd ever experienced in my whole life, of all things. Of the pain on top of everything and all the stabbing, the cancer, the whatever. And it was like 3 months of every cell of my body wanting to be away from its neighboring cell. And like I would hit my head frequently, just like jar myself enough just to have a contiguous thought.
You just did it cold turkey?
Yeah. So they put me on a I forget what it is, the one that's substitute. Say again? Suboxone. So it is Suboxone. Oh, yeah. And I think I was on it for a couple months. But they said too, I think it was Dr. John Mackey at Stanford, they're like, this is abnormal. I was like, how many patients are on it for like 5 years? Or I don't know, because my experience was so raw. Suboxone didn't help the translation of it, so it got off the wean off the Suboxone. And that's when I just started researching the hell out of methadone. Just a quick segue. It'll be interesting, I promise. Oh, yeah. So methadone was created by the Third Reich in World War II. So Allied forces shut off the opiate trade going to the Third Reich. And Hitler had no painkillers, no opiates for his soldiers. And to carry a wounded soldier that doesn't have any painkillers off a field versus carrying a wounded soldier that has painkillers versus a dead soldier, like the numbers go up exponentially if the soldier's wounded, the amount of people it takes to take care of them. So it's smart strategy if you're trying to beat someone in combat. And Hitler puts his best researchers on it, and they invent a synthetic opiate, synthetic heroin, that is measurable. The reason why it's associated with heroin users is because it's synthetic and it can be titrated specifically, which you guys don't understand the value of that, where if you have an organic opiate, you don't know the intensity of it. So he created a synthetic that they could create, that they could have, and it was called adolphafine. And it just got rewinded. It originally was a painkiller, and then it got used for heroin addicts to get off of the heroin. But the problem is it has twice the shelf life of heroin. So getting off of it is twice as hard as heroin.
Yeah, it's long acting. So where, you take heroin in the morning and 8 hours later, you're going into withdrawals. But 5 or 7 days later, the withdrawals are sort of resolving. Whereas with methadone, you got 56 hours roughly of half-life. So it's taking days and days before you even get into the worst of the withdrawal. And then that's why, and then it's lasting for months.
And then the build up to me, the way I tried articulating to people is like, if you think of a cell, a receptor cell, or if it's a nerve cell, but a cell that can receive opiates, it's like every receptor, maybe originally you have 2 or 3 on every cell that receives an opiate. And those, like, it's like a little hungry baby bird in the mother's nest. It's going, wah, 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 wah. But the more opiates you take, the more bird mouths you got to feed. And you have hundreds. It's like each cell now has hundreds instead of 1 or 2. And so I've got, millions of receptors going, and it's like, I mean, it was.
Do you remember how many milliliters or milligrams you were on?
I think I was on 80 milligrams 4 times a day, but then Oxycontin.
4 times a day?
Yeah.
Holy crap.
That's a really high dose of methadone.
I was on the highest of everything, essentially.
How you stop that, man? Seriously?
So I had friends that would say things to me like, dude, you must be so high. I'm like, you have no fucking idea what this is masking. You have no idea. Like, you try just 20 milligrams of Oxycontin, and they will do it, and all of a sudden they're vomiting. I'm like, I'm on 80 milligrams 4 times a day as well. So the doctors were very kind to me that were willing to prescribe that. And it breaks my heart to think that patients can't get painkillers that they honestly need. Because my doctor was willing to, say, well, we can do the max dosage, but that's it. But it still didn't really. I mean, I was much better at dealing with my pain once I got off everything. And this byproduct of being on all this stuff, which is important, I think, to tell people, is I always tell guys that are deciding whether to get on something like Neurontin or gabapentin, is that you got to take a journal and you have to write down your state of being before you get on the stuff, and then every 2 weeks, write if you notice any changes, modulations in your character well-being. I had this place at year 5 where I thought I could not pass a window without actually wanting to jump through it. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's not a lie. For about a year and a half, 2 years, every time I passed a window, the impulse to jump through it was in me. And I just thought it was me not being able to deal with my injury and sort of psychically just being.
But that was when you were on medication.
Yeah. So that's the point. When I got off the Neurontin specifically, like 80% of those thoughts just went right out the window. And it took like a couple of weeks before, or like maybe a month before those other rest just went away. But I was like, and then my fight to live came back up. That pilot that was extinguished, that I was choking on the fumes from, finally kicked back in. And I knew that there was a cost, and my memory was just miserable. I could not have a conversation with asking you. I mean, it was every 30 seconds or so. Like, what were we talking about? Like, what did you just say? Like, what was I trying to get across? Which took me like a couple of years to get that back. I mean, it's kind of like a slow. Gabapentin has the equivalent of onset Alzheimer's for reducing neuronal connectivity. So neurons connecting. There's tons of studies with suicide. They've been taken to court so many different times for suicide, but people use it for epilepsy, chronic nerve pain. It's like the go-to for nerve pain, and some people have really great effects with it, which I don't ever want to stop someone from having freedom. But for me, I just don't want people to. It was psychically damaging for me to think it was all me that was having those thoughts, and really it's actually the parallels is whacked. When I got jumped by the gang, I always thought the best outcome for me was like, oh, I knew who I was before that happened, like how I handled myself, the circumstance, how I treated the guys that I was yelling at, the OGs in the back, like, this is how you fucking teach your kids. I'm 21 years old, holding my intestines in my stomach, pushing them back in, going. My response was I was bummed out that this is what happens to young kids. And that's how they get sort of brought into the culture, which I understand, the context of guys not having fathers, things like that. But I was giving them crap. But after I got out of the hospital and how I handled getting there and everything about it, I had a deep respect for myself. I was like, wow, you handled that well. Because I'd never really been in like a, life and death circumstance with that kind of violence. And I'd always doubted myself. So you can't know until you go through it. So for me, I was like, now I know. I'm never going to doubt myself. The same context with the painkillers and that, the anti-epileptics, I completely learned to doubt myself. Because I was thinking must be weak if I want to jump through the window. Like my willingness to live life is been, other people could do it. Christopher Reeves is, in a wheelchair, neck is broken, can't feel his kids hug him. Maybe feel him kiss him on the cheek, but can't feel your own kids hug you. Can't hug them back. Those are people that are heroes, that if they can tolerate that and still find joy in life. And so my capacity to not feel joy and to connect with others, it just felt like it was a defect of character, which I was somewhat shocked about because I was always a quick healer and rebounder. But at some point, you're like, no, dude, it's just you. And then when I got off the meds, I was like...
that came back.
Yeah.
And how
Yeah,
was that exercise?
gabapentin's one of those ones that, as an Ibogaine provider over the years, you just see it being prescribed more and more, and with no warning that there's going to be any hard time coming off of this, no real warning of side effects while you're on it. It seems like, all of a sudden it was the new wonder drug everybody was getting put on. And I remember a guy, he was prescribed 3,000 milligrams a day of that stuff and had no idea that it was going to be a challenge coming off. And I've had multiple people say that was the hardest one for them to come off, even harder than heroin.
Yeah, that in the context of the online community with my injury as a source of information, I tend to be a researcher just out of curiosity. I like understanding the mechanisms of things, but I'd always put this information out there just so others could be informed. What they choose to do with it, do whatever you got to do. But there's two women that were taking them to court, that both their husbands were physicians and surgeons, and they committed suicide unexpectedly. They both were prescribed gabapentin for other injuries that also create nerve pain. And the women found each other on an online community for suicide. Women surviving suicide, and they both heard their stories, like what? And they found that both husbands were both on gabapentin. Then they started researching all the different court cases of them being taken to court, and they created Lyrica, which is like a sister or a cousin drug, which you can prescribe. It might be more beneficial. Some people have had great benefits with it, which I always have to say, everything has a cost, or to respect everything in that sense. Just know what you're getting into. Yeah.
So that was coming off all the meds. Yeah. And then, you'd been talking about being in the MRI machine and seeing this, So
that was probably the most empowering moment of my whole experience to date at that section, because going to the MRI machine and Christopher Deschamps, which I just love, anyone who's creative and wants to help people in a creative way, like he's marrying different things, I just deepest respect for. But he asked me in the machine, I got to go there during the holiday break, which is great because I got to go in there a bunch more than normal. Like these clinicians had to get in a certain amount of hours for their clinical trials. So I was like, I'm around. I can do this all day long if you guys want to. So it was a week and a half run where I was in there every day for 3 or 4 hours. But he asked me when I'm in there, I got 3 goggles on, I'm seeing my brain. He says, okay, I want you to think about your pain, the worst pain you've ever experienced, and feel it, and really go into it. I was like, what? This is the last thing you'd ever imagine doing because you're just surrounded by it nonstop. And I did that, and I just saw the pain regions in my brain just flare up, these red sort of illuminated spots in my brain. I'm seeing my brain on real time, responding to my pain. And then he goes, okay, now do the exact opposite. No pain. So I was actually immediately flying over the Swiss Alps, diving in and out of waterfalls, feeling water sprinkle over my body and the sun baking my skin. Just engaging my imagination with all the sensory components possible. And that's sort of my theatrical training background dropping in. And immediately it's all the blood completely devoid out of those regions of the brain. I was like, wow. And I would feel those differences as well.
Whoa, that's crazy. Whoa.
You changing that internal.
He's doing that with depression. So he's trying to do this for other types of disorders and situations. And I really got active with it. I got a system for myself. I felt like I really get into it. And he asked me, so what did you always want to know, what did I do to create that pain or the relief of the pain? For the first one, old acting training was just to, you ramp it up as long as it's realistic. I was like, I just totaled my sister-in-law's car with her daughters, my goddaughter in the car, and she's 4 years old, and I'm drunk, and I'm gotten out of the car, and the car's on fire, and she's trapped in, trying to scream in the window, and my sister-in-law's behind me screaming at me. I'm imagining a circumstance that I would not be able to come away from alive, like just psychically. And just feeling that sense of suffering and pain, you'd see the brain there, and the brain doesn't, if you understand, if you visualize, the brain can't tell the difference if you experience something visually, in imagination context. And the power of that to regulate it and modulate it and to actually have an effect on it. So one of the hard components of this nerve pain is it has these flares come in and go out. It comes in, so the baseline pain of 5 and 6, and then the top pain, which I would always say like 11 is suicide. 10 is you're cutting off your own limb with a rusty saw. And that hitting 10, I was like, you don't know what that's really like, dude. You can't get there. So I was like 9. But I'd tell doctors this just because like, your 10, my 10 might be your 20 or whatever you decide to phrase it. There's no like real system to categorize and catalog this. At least that's been my experience. But he asked me, so what? Yeah, so what did I do? He'd catalog it and he'd write it down, and I'd ask him what other patients had done. And so I was able to do this regulation. But the pain duration of what I experienced, the roller coaster of it it's like this window. It's like a burst of like 30 seconds to maybe 2 or 3 minutes, going on 4 to 6 times every 10 minutes. It's when it's really bad, or it could be 4 to 6 times every hour. So it's like this ramping and going. It's like up and down, up and down. It doesn't present a consistent thing to work with, like to really jump on. And so the meditative strategy I learned from the real-time MRI machines, it's like to do that actively. I could do it on my own. I would do it frequently, but to do it while I was having a conversation with someone, it's like doing sit-ups and push-ups at the same time. You can't, to allocate that part of your brain to be able to do that, which is great.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If you're alone, it was a great tool, and I would try and sharpen it. I really thought I could become a master. I got deep into meditation.
I mean, it makes sense because you need to be imagining that scenario to the point where that's what's happening.
That's to dominate your experience, and to try and have a dialogue at the same time.
Ask for a level of concentration from you, right?
Yeah. Which is basically all of it. Like I would do specific breathing. Like I would feel like I had a long, third eye, and I'd breathe my pain into it, and then I'd breathe back and breathe just like new energy into my brain, like fresh. Like I was doing all these different sort of things, and it was effective. It was taking up all my attention.
So was it effective to the point of reducing the background pain, navigating the spikes of pain, like
navigating the spikes of pain, but it only lasted as long as you were doing it. So it didn't have like this residual ongoing. And I tried for a few years, and I ended up have done 5 10-day silent retreat sets where you're meditating vipassana, like going like 14 hours a day meditating. I've done 5 of those and 4.
Some people find those very painful.
Yeah. So and there's a component to that too, that I couldn't. You have to sit in perfect silence for an hour at a run, and sitting in perfect silence, cross-legged, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45. Like at 45 minutes, your hips are exploding, your knees are exploding. But honestly, though, and I would never be able to do it like the first 3 times I did it. Like it would only be like the 10th day I could finally drop into it and do it. But the time it all stopped was when I just said to myself, I could sit here forever. I can sit here forever. I was like telling my body, like, it doesn't matter what happens. I will age myself into dust before I move. And the brain kind of just gave in.
You took control of it, basically, right?
Which I've tried to, like, all this different stuff. It's like, really, like, is this my dojo? Is pain a dojo? Or am I going to be a slave to it? Do I want to be a learner, or I want to? How can I make this a secret power? And I really tried finding a way. I tried so many things, and then after years of you,
I've been twice to Vipassana, and the first time I was so convinced that I was gonna leave. Like I was sitting there just thinking about the bus is probably just down the street. Like I could just go back to my room and pack my bags and walk down to the street. And that was my experience for the first 6 or 7 days. And then at some point I was, well, I'm already on day 7. I'm probably going to get to the 10th day. But the second time I knew I wasn't going to go, leave. Like I knew that I was going to stay the 10 days. And my experience then was that it was like you were saying, it was very painful to sit there. But especially when we get to those hours of strong determination, they call it, where you have to sit without moving or twitching or scratching, or, you have to focus and do everything that you've been learning and practicing for that hour. And it would be extremely painful. And I started to find for me that time, the first 6 or 7 days were the best because it was uncomfortable. Because the point was having something to be able to focus on and sharpen your mind on. And so with the discomfort, once I knew that I could sit there for an hour without moving, then the discomfort was just an edge to sharpen my mind on. When I got to day 7 or 8 and the pain went away, then I was lost. Like, then my mind was going all over the place. Like, yeah, so it actually showed me too that I could use pain and discomfort, like you're talking about, not on the same level or anything, but just realizing that, okay, no, it's actually, that sensation is a tool. And if I find moments of discomfort and I find a way to lean into it, maybe I can learn from it.
In the context too of identifying from equanimity, observing the sensation in the language used is also, it's a gross sensation, or is it not like it's a painful, the language you apply to it and the way you witness it become extremely important, and like the language for anything, but your capacity to identify it in a different framework. And I love that intelligence behind that. And it changed the relationship to things. I mean, it gives you an authority. You can say it's a sort of disassociation, but frankly, I would much rather have that level of connection and authority over my being than being controlled by my body all the time. Because the body wants to be the brain, which there's a symbiosis between the two. But I think the mind should learn to be on top of the game so that it can then integrate in a more holistic way instead of like, oh, I'm hungry, or whatever it is.
Seems like there is a way to be feeling the pain and then to observe the pain, right? And to be behind that and just let it go.
The mind-body component really, which is that was the letting go. Like me learning to say I can be here forever was a letting go. It was my way of surrendering and saying, okay, pain, take me. I'm never going to move. And that changed the whole relationship to it. So then it became something of so I learned for years. So I kept on going back to the meditation. I could do this during the day. It's great. But during sleep, I had 5 sleep studies, never had any stage 3 sleep. And it's like, it's not regenerative. You're just waking up exhausted all the time. And it's just, it's like, and actually I would ask physicians, get these done, the insurance would pay for it to be done in these clinics, but then finally get like a UCLA physician to look at it, a more established, respectable facility, and they're like, you don't really need stage 3 sleep. I was like, look, I read like 5 books by top specialists. I actually had surgeries up at Stanford. They're the ones that first did the sleep studies. They're the ones that created sleep studies. Anyway, it's just, you have to be willing to do your own research with things like this and kind of put it together.
So that was what you were able to learn up to that point, was how to deal with or manage the pain.
Yeah, on my own. And when I did my verse Vipassana too, I had obviously a different motivation. So I was trying to conquer this pain to essential, or find a way to find a harmony with it. And when I got to day 3 of just breathing, just feeling the nostril hairs on my nose and the air going in and out. 3 days, it's like, that's your IMAX theater. 3 days, 14 hours a day, and this is your IMAX. That's all you're seeing and feeling. Is it cold? What's the sensation like? And it's like, holy shit. And you drop into that. And then actually I got kind of bored with it. And I was like, well, what else can I feel? And I remember it was like, oh, well, I did feel when I got stabbed. I actually felt like what it was like inside. Like after like a couple hours, when I was in the waiting room in the hospital, I was like, oh yeah, my insides do have feelings. Like there's, I just don't think about them because they're not being activated. So I went in, pierced. I mean, it sounds a little bit hokey, but I went into my body. I could feel inside my intestines. I could feel the blood rushing through in the artery beside my spine. I went up with it into my brain. I mean, whether I was fantasizing it all or not, but I had a very distinct, and when I would do that, whenever I go into the gut responds. Like my gastrointestines will start making noises, and that's like happens all the time whenever I do that. And it's like, whoa, there's something, I'm actually in touch with something. So it became constant curiosity. I felt like, okay, this is a teaching thing. This is pain. If I can find ways to be a master of something, this is a good thing.
So it sounds like basically kind of 5 years on the medication and then maybe 15 years of these different modalities, trying to find your way without the medication. And then how did Ibogaine come on the radar?
So the pain realization that I can't do this on my own anymore was, I was leading a morning meditation group, 7 a.m. for 8 a.m. every day, every weekday. So I'd meditate at least 5 hours a day, 5 hours a week, minimum, because I was doing that. And it was driving to meditation in the morning, like 6:30 in the morning. Totaled my 72 Chevy Suburban I had for like 25 years. I got T-boned by a car. This trip happened. Long and short of it is I had 2 vehicles totaled within a year. One was going to meditation, one was coming back. And that's when I got more sleep studies done. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I could have killed people in these accidents. And this is because of sleep deprivation.
Because you were falling asleep at the wheel?
I guess I was just fogging it. I wasn't resting enough. My brain was not. My reaction, the first one was an RTD bus was coming into my lane, like a residential thing going into a more like a 4-lane major street situation. RTD bus comes in, he's cutting into me, so I decided to go around his back end. And this is the sun's just barely kind of coming up kind of thing. And go around his back end, and there's a like 2006 Red Acura. Wham! He's going to the hospital, which I found out after. He's going like 50 miles an hour on a 35-mile street, but he T-boned my Suburban, a 72. That thing's cut it in half. And I literally, my shoulder, I was holding the steering wheel because there's no seatbelt laws in that car, and it's a big couch seats, which I just love, that whatever. I was holding the steering wheel so hard, I popped my clavicle off my sternum. And I get out, like I was, for the first time ever, really feeling dazed. I was like, whoa. And I see his car, and I see 2 baby seats in the back seats. In the back, I can see it. And I just immediately start sobbing. I was like, oh my, I don't know if this guy's dead or not. I'm trying to get the door open. The door pops open. He pops out and just comes right at me, not like in an aggressive way. He's like checking. So the fact that he didn't look in his back seats, I knew there's no babies. Yeah. So I was like, fuck. I was like, fucking, and whatever just happened will never fucking happen again. And then a year later, same thing happened on the way back from meditation. And I just blacked out, driving actually by a high school. Literally don't remember between one stop sign to the other, to the stoplight, and rammed into a pickup truck. I was like, I asked, psychiatrist, am I losing it? What's going on? It's like, no, dude, you just probably have sleep deprivation. I was like, I don't remember this block, which I do every single day. How does that happen? I came to, and he's like, well, you probably shouldn't. You should sleep better. So that started me down this road of I've got to find something. I've got to stop this. And I started, spinal cord stimulators. I went to get stem cell treatments in Kiev, Ukraine, in 2019. Which gave me 2 weeks of pain relief, which was amazing. And I was actually on the way back to Ukraine February 26th of 2022 to go get another treatment again. Because I only had 2 weeks of relief, and I had set a protocol together. I did all this research on spinal cord injury and pain treatment, and I was going to do 3 months to 4 months of intrathecal injections. My first round was just intravenously. And they had never done anything like that before. They had said no. I basically for like a year and a half trying to get them to do it. And they finally said, yes, we'll do this. And Putin invaded 2 days before my flights were to Ukraine. So my girlfriend at the time, I'd only been dating, I think, for like 3 months at the time, super intelligent. She has multiple sclerosis. She's reversed it herself from diet and health. And like she's a science nerd and junkie. And she was on top of this right away. She immediately just suggests to me when Putin invaded, she's like, why don't you try Ibogaine? I was like, what? I knew about Ibogaine. Actually looked into doing Iboga like 8 years previous, but for psychospiritual, I was very fascinated by it. And I was like, where did you come up with that? She's like, I don't know. The idea is just do it. And she sent me a study, or she found a patent from 1995 from University of Washington, St. Louis, where Dr. John Olney had been creating a treatment protocol for neuropathic pain. I was like, this is 1995. I tried actually finding out, contact with him and things like that. He passed away, unfortunately. He was a brain researcher, fascinating guy. But I was like, I really want to know how he got involved with Ibogaine for neuropathic pain specifically. Right. And then reading that and then seeing that documentary by Chris Bell, Ibogaines, where he documents himself. And I think he's had hip replacements and knee replacement, but his own experience with Ibogaine. And I was like, just those two components were enough. I was like, I'm game on. I'm going to find someone to do it. And I was trying to do it in Los Angeles. Practitioner I knew via friends. Her husband works with MAPS, but she had recommended you to get in touch with you, and actually looked at other clinics, possibly in Tijuana, also online, but also COVID was happening. So it was like places were not happening, weren't going on. And I was so grateful that she had turned on the possibility of Ibogaine because I needed something. I'd spent like basically a year trying to get into Kiev and have them do this protocol because I was like trying to create something that I could solve the problem with completely. But finding you guys, I was trying to find out the mechanism of it, of what was going on. And I had theories in the context of, is this giving a neurological set, like a reset? Is it allowing the system to be devoid of pain for a window of time? When I was first injured, I'd read studies in Germany that they'd induce a 4-day ketamine coma for people with reflex sympathetic dystrophy or complex regional pain syndrome, CPR, which is a neurological damage. Like, could be a hit without a break on the arm. Also, the system over-responds and they can't walk. And actually, 2 patients like that at the Stanford Pain Clinic, they had to turn off all the AC on. And this one woman was she would wear the shortest skivvy shorts, and it was probably 260 pounds. She could not have anything contacting her left leg. And you could see the hairs, the skin color tones were different, just like the nervous system overreacting, freaking out. But this ketamine-induced coma in Germany was curing this. So resetting the nervous system, that's always been in the back of my head. And I've always tried to think there's got to be something that maybe does this, some kind of experience where they can have this happen.
So where normally like a ketamine infusion is 40 minutes or something like that, they're doing it over 4 days and just trying to completely knock out pain sensation and give your system a chance to totally reset.
And so I'd known of people, other guys that had done, and I looked into this at UCLA. I was actually on the wait list at USC for ketamine infusions that would do, high intensity for like 5-6 hours, but not to that level, but to keep it sort of in the system for a long period of time. And there's no positive response with this injury. No lasting response.
Other guys that had a similar injury to you.
So basically they have to do big amounts for a long period of time.
Yeah, the max day, I think the max was 10 days that they would do that over treatment, but most physicians will only do 4 days, I think.
Yeah, that's a long time still. Yeah. I mean, so ketamine works on NMDA, right? It's an NMDA antagonist. And then acutely that creates a reduction of pain, like NMDA can be involved in pain treatment directly. But NMDA is also really active in the process of neuroplasticity. right? So there's maybe some ability then for the system to be able to rewire and reconfigure itself to some degree. So it makes sense. And, Ibogaine, we can talk about those, also is an NMDA antagonist, as is ketamine, although it only has low affinity there and it does a lot of other things as well. But so there's some maybe rationale for that. But the other thing is when you take Ibogaine, you're already going under for a long time. It's not normally 40 minutes. Like Ibogaine is normally, 12, 24 hours that people are under the effects. So there's some relevance there to your theory. Yeah.
For me, I was very excited about. I mean, in the context too of doing other research, the way I'd heard Ibogaine being compared to is like it's the Everest of psychedelics. And that's very frightening to a certain degree, but it's also exciting if it's therapeutically being used for me. It might give me the most amount of time in the capacity to reconfigure what's going on, if there's a way to do that. So connecting with you, we had some Zoom calls, and we had another one with Trevor, and you guys were parsing out whether the group that I was coming with, it was vets' wives. I guess the vets had such a positive experience come January that I think a few months later, they're like, the wives all have to go too, because they've been enduring these vets for X amount of years. And there's a window where I think you asked me, like, I'd be willing to do it? I was like, absolutely, I'll do it with anybody. But yes, if they would be willing to take me in as another patient. And they accepted, and it was like a journey of the ritual context of like going into something, an experience, a transformative experience, and going into a place where you don't know, you're diving into the Everest, essentially, psychedelics, and I have no idea what's going to be turned up or not. And one thing I had been told, or I think I'd read somewhere, but I didn't know how true it would be or not, but that it can be like holding your nose to the shit of your life. Like if you're a dog, and the way people would tell a dog not to shit in the rug is to put the dog's nose in that shit. It's like, and I was like, well, if that's going to help, well, I have no problem excavating what psychologically might be involved with me to help create this pain. But if that's what's needed, like, please bring it on. Yeah. But it's also like, what does that mean? Like, what shits do I not know I've been dropping on whose rugs, or my own rug of life? But the amount of, the blessing, and I love actually being in the space with the treatment center I was in, is that it brings back such a warm fondness of, it's like you feel like you're being so nurtured and taken care of that you have only space to reciprocate to yourself in that same way. Mm-hmm. It's like monkey see, monkey do. Like you're having people that are really caring for you so much that it's inspiring. Like I've never had any group of people I just met before ever attend to me with such true concern and care. And it's not like, oh, this is a temporary job. Like you're living in the moment of it. And it just makes you feel so willing to step into whatever fear zone that might be present. But also I want to use that as a template how I treat myself. Like when do I ever treat myself with that much actual nurturing and care? It's like, whoa, so thank you. But I can go into the experience of it.
So but just to give as a reference point, when you came down, you had really high blood pressure.
High blood pressure, high heart rate. Ever since I was injured, they had me, without even knowing it, I had a Klonopin patch in my arm, which they told me was for nerve pain, but also for heart rate and blood pressure. Which when I got off that stuff, I wish I could stay on it now because it had an effect, a positive effect in the context of lowering blood pressure and heart rate, or at least that one for the blood pressure. Those unfortunately depressed me. I've tried like 20 different types of blood pressure meds, and they don't know exactly what the cause is. Either it's the nerve pain or it's damage to the vagus nerve as well, which innervates the heart and part of the responsible for blood pressure as well. One of the end results of being Ibogaine, which is I've been wearing a Aura ring since 2019, watching this stuff, and I was trying to also see what was effective for my sleep function and kind of watch the metrics of things. I was getting my heart when I go to sleep has not been below like 80, maybe 78 max during my rest state. Pre-injury, my heart would be in its 50s sitting down. You know, I don't know, I never measured it when I was actually asleep, but you know, good athlete. And chronically, it's like 100 to 120 anytime during the day. Sometimes it's 100 when I'm sleeping, it's 120 when I'm sleeping. And I don't know exactly why. I've tried different body positions and things like that. Ibogaine, when I was on microdosing, following months, my heart was going into the 50s. Mm-hmm. Upper 50s, staying in the 60s, like throughout the night. And
so you were going into a rest state.
I was going into rest state, and also, I mean, I don't know if it was like, I thought it could have been rest state from not being in pain, so my body's finally able to relax. Or is it also having a neuroregenerative capacity? I didn't know because I can't determine those things, but it's never been like that since. I mean, when I stopped microdosing, it slowly climbed back up.
I see. Okay. So that was so before you had the really high blood pressure. What was going back to before you took the Ibogaine? What was your pain sensation like at that time? That had been 20 years since your original injury.
So, and I tried different modalities. I was on this sort of mission to stop the pain because basically I had remained single for 13 years because I was like, I can't involve this in someone else's life. The pain was just, I was like, it's enough for me to suffer, but I want anyone else to suffer. And I kind of just said, well, this isn't working for me anymore. So I actually got into a relationship with someone then, but I was already on a mission to nix the pain, like figure out a way to do it because of the sleep dysfunction, dysregulation. One of these odd components of my ex Marielle is that I don't know how to figure this out, but she could sense my being in pain about 98% of the time. There's only like two small, like this is my back was turned to her. I was walking away. She doesn't see my face. And this is relevant in the context of after treatment because at like day 2, I just didn't talk about it. I'd tell her she was super curious. I was curious. But we were walking to go do this thing on a Sunday. Like it was a sunny day in Los Angeles. And she started sobbing. It's like, I haven't seen you in pain in the last 2 days. And I was just like, it's fucked up. And so this experience, it was so validating because someone actually knew what I was experiencing regularly. And so that's why she jumped on the bandwagon to help find a sort of recipe of cure because, I mean, it's a surreal experience when you have to live I'm in pain. I'm on the top of a volcano. You guys have no idea, and I got very good at masking it.
Yeah, it's you don't show it.
So yeah, to a deficit, you start masking other shit in your life that you're not conscious of. It just becomes this like way of doing, of being. And having someone be conscious of that, you're experiencing that. It's like what? And then it's validating, but then it's also like this extra burden. Like I don't want to put her through this crap. But at any rate, and it changed the dynamic of a relationship because it became this sort of caretaker thing, which is not healthy. But the benefits of it in the context of Ibogaine, first of all, for her recommending it, but that she had the capacity to know how much I was benefiting and not. Right. And I had some microdosing with me and went through, I think, a week of it and trying to play around with it. And I ramped it up too high a little bit, and it's kind of buzzy feeling in the morning, and wait for it to sort of go back down. And I think it was like after a week, I just said, I want more. Like I want to try this again. Like, can we?
Well, still describe, but the first time you came down, what was the sensation like at that point? Do you remember?
Yeah. So when I first came down, there's my ex, I just said Marielle and I at that time, I think the stress of the relationship was too much too. So I also stopped seeing her. And so I was conscious of like wanting to tell her of my experience as I was having, because she was conscious of that. And so there's certain windows of time that I know I wanted to express what was going on. So it logs in that much deeper into the head. It was a little bit of a fog experience coming out of the Ibogaine sessions, like, going back to my room and finding a window of time to sort of sleep it off. And when I was going through the Ibogaine, I do not recall at any point having pain experiences. I don't recall. I mean, I was having other intense experiences, having strong visual experiences and sort of traveling experiences. But coming, sort of my body's titrating off the Ibogaine, I was hyper conscious that of having sort of waking in and out of wake up state, sleep state. Sleeping was a little difficult, but that there was no pain. And it felt like there's this like vacuum. There's a component of my hand's partially innervated, so there should be sensations. There's some sensation. It's like feeling through a cheesecloth or something. It's like muted sensations. I was able to feel the actual numbness in the hand for the first time instead of being masked by burning fire or crushing. It's like there's a vacuum of sensation, but the real sensation that was available to be felt. And so I actually felt like I was actually feeling my hand for the first time.
So the prior to it was that you were saying it was burning fire
all the time,
just all day long, all night, and then there was peaks. Like, what was it the same? Like because I remember you describing a little bit that it had gotten worse over time.
Yeah. So I think. I don't know if the intensity of my drive trying to find an answer for this had put me. I just realized that things were not working out over time. So I said, this is my mission. Like, if I'm going to help anyone in life, it's going to be me right now. I'm going to solve this fucker because I'm not satisfied with where this is going, and I don't see a happy road. I had windows of time. Like, I could only do this for a few more years. I don't think I can really tolerate this that much longer. Which is fucking hard. I mean, it's like you're fucking exhausted, dude. It's like, and I thought, I got the capacity. I'm going to find some way to make this happen.
So do you think that drive was making you maybe like more sensitive?
Yeah, it was like I was on gangbusters, trying to find it. And I also felt responsible because of my position with this nonprofit and all the different physicians I know that deal with this injury, and I wanted to bring them a recipe to treat other patients as well. So when I would do my research and things like that, trying to understand something, I would have it thorough enough where I could put it out to someone else who's in the medical profession that was undeniable. I was trying to make everything bulletproof. And like before I came down here, I was actually trying to get real-time MRI machine scans of my brain at USC, like I had done at Stanford, so they could see, so you could quantify the pain. And that's one of the things that, how can you quantify something if someone's having an experiential and it's inside them? Well, the real-time MRI machine does do that, just like they did in my docs at USC, God bless them. They're like, oh, we can't do that. I was like, well, it's being used. Like, yeah, but we can't just say we're going to do that. I was like, well, why not? Anyway, so there, I felt like a level of responsibility, which was probably making things a bit more intense for me. But my pain was escalating. It was getting more out of control, and it wasn't becoming. There was no dojo anymore.
So you had.
There was no asset. It was just like it was becoming like this is a constant car wreck.
Do you think because you were trying to find a way to get rid of it that you weren't doing the meditation of acceptance and?
There's definitely, yes. I think I'd shifted gears. There was a component too when my sleep was so dysfunctional and I'm waking up, waking up at 6 o'clock to do the meditation, and then I go for a run, just trying to get my natural endorphins going on, get some control. That I was doing a house build project in Wyoming, and I couldn't keep the two going at the same time, working from Los Angeles and flying out to Wyoming, but I was just spent. And I was actually working with a designer buddy of mine staying at my place, and he'd see me go through the cycles of like wake up, meditation, come back, sleep for an hour, then get back into work and do stuff. And he's like, dude, you just got to stop doing the meditation. And I was like, I felt a responsibility, like I got to do that. But I was like, you're right, I can't fucking sleep. It's not working. It's like, I just needed to get some more sleep. So I would use that time. But that was a bit of a healthy tether, like in the exercise component. I just dropped it for the work project. But the intensity of this work project was on a mountain in Jackson Hole, big house. It just compounded everything. And also my right lung's paralyzed from the injury. So when I'd be in Wyoming at 9,000 feet, my breathing capacity was limited, and my Oura ring would measure my heart rate at nighttime. It was never below like 95, 98. I was like, it's always like, boom, 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 boom. So it was like an unraveling to a degree. And I lost that healthy tether with the meditation.
So was it still at that 5 or 6 level baseline and then spiking?
Yeah, well, in Wyoming, it was probably 7 baseline. I mean, it was like the hard part. Yeah, so the hard part with this, at least for me, is my brother and sister got me when I got off all my medication, they got me a hiking trip with this small group in the Himalayas. So I hiked to Everest Base Camp essentially over a course of a month. It's a tremendous gift. Beautiful siblings giving me this gift, like to get myself back in it. But I was like 70 pounds overweight. My right lung was paralyzed. Starting off at like 13,000 feet up to 18,000 feet. I was like a rabid dog, like every step, irritated, fat, sweating, and out of breath. Why the hell am I telling you this? There was a reason for it. It's context. What did you say just a second? Oh yeah. So it was an abnormal winter there. It hadn't snowed. It was supposed to be snow. It had been an abnormal winter, and I had already conscious that I can feel nerve pain. I can feel weather patterns with my nerve pain. Any change in barometric pressure or change or flux, I can tell you 12 hours before the storm comes in and stuff like that. Like here in Mexico, it's just enough. It's tapered down, that Billy, but I could feel it happening. But when I was in the Himalayas, I told everyone like a day in advance, like guys, and we were at the middle. No one had any radios or like that. Like guys, it's going to snow or something. It's going to rain. It's going to happen like soon. They're like no. Anyway, for the next 2 weeks, they're asking the weatherman always asking like what's going to happen next. We got a huge dump of snow, and in Wyoming, just like where I grew up in New Hampshire or going to San Francisco, I've stayed in Los Angeles for the last 20 years because of the weather. It's my ball and chain just because it's a drier, more consistent climate. My pain increases like 25% like living in Wyoming. So that level of sensitivity, and I don't know what that's all about. In the context of having nerve damage, surrounded by spinal fluid essentially. So it's like I don't know if it's like wires in a pool of water, and we're like 60% to 80% water, and so there's changes in pressure. Do I feel that internally? But same happens with arthritics and things like that. They move to like New Mexico or Arizona because they don't have that joint pain.
So that was coming in, the pain. Those are like compounding factors, like where you were, the fact that you'd, stress load, your relationship to the pain had been changing and everything. So
yeah, I'd lost I let go of my sort of strategies to work with it better.
Basically, the change of your habits brought about the pain.
Brought back pain, but the intensity. I was trying to also live a more productive life. I was committing to.
But that was because you was feeling like you got to a point where you was feeling like you was driving the pain in the correct way, and you was like, I can just move forward.
But in life, I felt like if I don't do something now, like as far as like work relationships and things like that, opportunities came to me. I was like, I can't deny this. And it was like a godsend to be building a house in Wyoming, Jackson Hole of all places. But it also became it's one of my favorite places on the planet pre-injury. But when I was there, it was like became this death trap just because of the elevation. It's just one of these things happen in life. Yeah.
Okay. So do you remember then the first Ibogaine experience? Like you mentioned that you didn't have pain that night and the day afterwards. You don't remember a pain experience, but do you remember the experience at all? Like what was
the Ibogaine experience itself?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It was really like none other I had. I mean, I can go through a step by step of it, but there's components of taking the first dosage. We had a bit of a ceremony of letting go of what we're bringing in with the fire and putting it there, and then taking another one, and we start to feel it. We go up to the bed we're going to lay down, and also we have IV units with electrolytes in us to help us, and EKGs to help monitor things, which I was very grateful for. I mean, the whole professionality of you guys' outfit was, well-being was like, the Everest, the paramount thing. But going into it with the feeling the Ibogaine experience come in, And I don't know if you want me to tell you, as I had us in front of a mirror, sitting in front of a mirror, as it would start to come in and staring at yourself. And I can feel the sort of flush and rush of just, it felt like energy shifting and changing throughout me, moving within me. And the Bwiti music that was playing was really, the ceremonial music was really, it was sort of transfixing. And it was really this one element of it that I would discover later was it had this like sort of off syncopated movement, change, flux to it that felt like a kind of experimental jazz that had a connectivity of people playing, working together with it. And I felt like it was a mimicking of the experience with the psychedelic, that it was pulling me apart, changing me, putting me back together, reforming me, connecting me, shifting me. And when I couldn't look at myself in the mirror anymore in the context of my visuals were, my eyebrows became this like one sort of giant thing. And I was like, okay, enough of that. I think I have to lay down. But like, I was working on my face. I really wanted to get inside me. I really wanted to connect. And like, if there's an answer inside, please, like I want to be here to receive it and give it. But when I just started changing beyond that's time to let go of the visual for me. So I went into laying down. And for me, the experience was, I immediately saw shadows and darkness and light. And it was as if there was a campfire behind me or something. And it was like I could see movement of light and dance and shift. And then I would see sort of figures coming closer to me, then pulling back, closer to me and pulling back. And the first one I saw was like an old, weathered, wise man, African, come very close, really warm eyes, and then his eyes shifted very close to my dad's, for whatever reason, like a sort of icy blue. And then it went back to him, and he pulled back. And that he was, I don't remember if he was informing me. I felt like they were moving and dancing for me, that they were trying to help heal me. And his coming back, he was checking in on me, but also informing me that I am being watched over, I am being taken care of. And it was a really connective serenity to, I was letting go of trying to assess anything. I just wanted whatever would happen, and I'll try and be as present as possible to it and receptive. And if I'm a player, if it needs me to be a player, I want to be a player. I just want to do whatever I need to do. And it would, I think the music would shift, and the scenarios would shift. And then I think I heard someone crying, and I was kind of happy for them because I figured that they were experiencing something they need to experience. And I just felt, okay, she's being taken care of, I'm sure. And then it evolved into greater and greater intensity. Like the visuals I was having, like I was like sort of projecting through universes, and I don't know what specifically to me this was, but it was mostly in black and white, and I was having images of things that were, I wouldn't necessarily they're humans, but they're beings, and shadows of them happening at like mass speed, and like just going through, like if it slowed down a bit, I may have been able to remember more, but it's like having such fast speed, it was just like, whoa. And then when it would slow down, like the strangest of like connectivity points where I would see this large, curious, bald head just like look at me and kind of look at me and get into me. And then all of a sudden a hand would come from the side, it's like right through the whole brain and skull. And I was like, it had a form of violence to it in the context that was a living, or that was a creature or whatever was going on, but there was no violence happening. It was just like matter of fact. And it was really, only in retrospect, because this happened quite a lot actually, like just things like heads melting and sort of hands coming through, or just a dissolving or dripping apart, that maybe this was like the Bwiti music that was having this sort of reconfiguration or shifting or changing of my understanding of myself, or the pain, or, because it wasn't like a torso, it was usually heads that were experiencing some sort of shifting, changing, whether it's coming from outside or inside. and really cartoonish. Though it was not like it was. Although there are moments where it was like crystal clear, dark, black and white, and then it would shift, the cartoonish. Really quite a surreal. I did not know. I did not. I've never had anything like that. I never would have imagined that. I didn't know what the source of that was. I did not imagine that I was the source, because the images were not anything that have any familiarity to me. That was some of the most fascinating, shocking part of it in that sense.
And then from what point do you think there was that break from the pain? Was it from early on, or?
Yeah, so that intensity, remember, a few moments I remember getting up to use the bathroom probably 4 or 5, 6 times or something to go to urinate. And that traverse was like kind of like you're crossing a universe sort of to get there. But that, I only mention that in the context of being aware of circumstance and place, and transitioning out of having an eye mask and going through this sort of interscape of experience, was that there was never, I would have been aware of it. I mean, I would like to think I would. Maybe I never remember recalling any pain experience. The one condition, though, with the pain is like it's so frequent that I would very often forget that maybe having it. I'm so adept to like dealing with it. And that's one thing, like Marielle, ex-girlfriend, her sensitivity to it. Like she would call me out when I wasn't even aware, and I'd be like, oh, of course, like, I'm just masking it to myself. It's interesting. But I was actually quite excited to be in my own bed. It felt like I'd gone through enough of the experience to lay down. And the more consciousness I had, I mean, I was already, I was here for a reason, for me. And this is the pain component. So I was very conscious that when I got into bed, I was not experiencing any pain. I was conscious, but I was still had distorted thinking, or capacity going on.
Can you relate that experience probably like the meditation experience, where basically the pain drive through another energy, and you was driving this energy through your journey, and basically pain wasn't there?
So I've had only 2 times in all the hours I've sat where I actually would go into the pain, focus on such intent detail that it would then shift. This only happened like twice. The first time it would shift into like pure energy. I was like, I felt like I just had like 20 crystal clean espressos or something. I was like, whoa. I was like, wow, that's just energy the whole time, just waiting there to be tapped into, to be recategorized or resorted or undistracted. Or I thought I could find a way to make that, like, how can I mainline that or whatever, find a way to redirect that. But after X amount of years, I never got that capacity to. But this, I felt like had shifted the pain's ability to connect or something. And I lay there and my hand was numb, but I was pretty foggy and pretty groggy. And then I was also excited to kind of go to sleep because I was a little bit like worn out. I mean, I think the journey itself is like whoa.
Yeah, that night you're not sleeping, and then the day afterwards you're just kind of.
Yeah. I mean, those moments where I'd wake up that next day, it's like holy ground. It's like I'm finally. I don't want to be facetious or whatever, but I feel like I just stepped out of concentration camp. Like, oh my God, thank you, fucking God. Like it's gone. Yeah. And the drive back up to Los Angeles was like, I was crying the whole fucking 3 hours. It was like, yeah.
Then you were back in LA. Marielle, I think you said is her name. She noticed that you were not in pain.
Yeah.
You were microdosing a little bit, and then you realized you wanted to do it again.
Do it again, like day 5.
Go deeper.
Yeah, I think it was day 5, day 6. I just like felt it slowly climbing back, and I was like, I put the brakes on it for a window of time. There were 2-3 days, like the brakes were on, it was gone, and I was like, I didn't do enough, and that was mindset. And so I reached out to just, is it possible? And I was like, I'll go as long. I mean, if you guys would say, dude, we can do a 20-day, I would be like, let's try it out or whatever. But
Right. So that's the point when we started talking about designing a different protocol. And
a brand new protocol.
Yeah. There was how do you say? There was treatments like that we'd seen done before. Basically, it was when you take Ibogaine, maybe 90% of the Ibogaine is metabolized out of your system within 24 hours, but it's getting metabolized into noribogaine. So when we give someone a flood dose of Ibogaine, essentially what we're doing is we're giving them the highest tolerable dose of Ibogaine that the system wants to process at once, and so that they're going to be ready to go home, right? So when you do that, you get a bunch of noribogaine and you kind of coast with the noribogaine for days or weeks, and there's other cascade of benefits that come on. But what we were attempting to do then was to accumulate the level of noribogaine. So we started with a small dose, and then the next day, and then the next day. We would kind of increase it every day. And what we're doing at that point is we're trying to build up the level of noribogaine, and we called it a saturation protocol. So there's different ways that you would try to do that kind of cumulative dosing for different reasons. But what we eventually, we didn't have it all mapped out when we started, but as we got closer to it, we started to realize what we could achieve was reaching a saturation point where, okay, we're going to, at the end of it, give you pretty close to a flood dose of the most amount of Ibogaine that we want to give you at once. But the end result is we've already built up so much noribogaine that you're going to be saturated with about as much noribogaine as, you can tolerate in your system at once. So that happened over a period of, I think it was 4 days before you took you took a pretty big amount in the morning, and then in the evening, that's kind of where it tipped the scales. And so,
yeah, that was
While we monitor your heart.
and
Like this is Ibogaine's always a don't try this at home, but working with these levels of Ibogaine is especially a don't try this at home. We had you, heart monitored, EKG, but EKGs every day, monitoring your QT interval.
Yeah, we got to really high levels of Ibogaine in your system. And the question mark for us, it was like, what was going to be the right dosage and how we was going to be able to manage a good amount of noribogaine in your plasma.
Yeah.
So your cells are always receiving that.
Yeah.
And for a long period of time. And that was like, seriously, we got a shot between the three of us to trying to figure out that. And Jonathan brought this idea, but the goal was like, bring and keep the noribogaine for a long period of time,
And we were thinking about that ketamine protocol, right? Where people were in that coma for 4 days and it was a system reset. And we knew you're going to be awake, you're not in a coma. But we felt like if we could cause, like after the first one, it seemed like you had a total break from pain for the first day. And then afterwards, smaller doses were able to not do as much as we hoped. Like really quickly, you were trying to ramp up the dose because you were trying to see if you could get the acute kind of pain reducing effect. So with the second dose, we wanted to see if that one pain-free day that you had, we wanted to see if we could extend it and sort of do something closer to what they're doing with those long-term ketamine treatments. And
how was that for you, Chris? How was that protocol? Because that's you've taken more Ibogaine consecutively than any of us have, man, and we've had a lot of Ibogaine.
Yeah, I bet. I was so excited that you guys were willing to. I didn't know what was going to happen. I threw out the idea of like, can we do this extended, like multiple days back to back or something? And your curiosity and willingness, and said, "Oh, interesting. Okay, let's look into this." And not like also your willingness, not just to say, "Yeah, let's do that." We'll think about it. Let's figure this out. So in that context, I already felt safe, but it just reconfirmed of your guys' efficacy, thanks, and attentiveness, and also what the base concern is. It's like, is this the right thing to do? Is wellness here? Is this good? So I was excited for it. I was a little nervous about it too, in the context of what am I going to get into and how far is this going to go. But in that old school mindset of pain is temporary, I was like, well, at least I can put a window of time. From all my experiences so far and everything I've read, there's not going to be any negative outcome, and any possible ones are going to be monitored and addressed already on top of it. So it seemed like it was a pretty surefire way to, at the very least, explore the possibilities of something. And that, to me, it's like that's my own responsibility to myself. Like I can't just fucking, whether it be living longer, like in suffering, or whatever you want to call it, or I need to excavate what I need to excavate to maximize my potentials in life. And this was like, it felt in respect and honor of all that. And you guys are like the perfect fucking co-pilots to feel so empowered and trusted and safe. And it's such a unique, and it's such a weird, it's such a unique capacity to be a frontiers person. We're not going into uncharted countries, like some adventurers did, or the North Pole. This is a language of trust and belonging and someone's own inner workings, and to figure out their own map of their own being to help them to help reconfigure that for wellness, and they're trying to get past some suffering, something that's holding them from being fully engaged in life. And that's, it's just I have the deepest, profound respect for you for doing that, sincerely. I've recommended you guys to more than a handful of different people I know, and I always say, you want to really feel safe and that you're doing the best thing possible, and you will be in good hands no matter what. Easy. Go down there.
Thanks for sharing
well,
that.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
That means a lot, yeah. And, it took a lot of courage as well. I mean,
man,
you said...
We honor you a lot because, since day one, Jonathan was, saying, I don't know, Chris is dealing with that. It's hardcore. And I was like, yeah, man, we're going through hardcore dosages of Ibogaine and really short periods of times, we was going through a different day. We were used to it. And seriously, we was honoring you because we was understanding at some level, or during the Ibogaine, not the pain, during the Ibogaine, how deep you was going through that process of getting to reconfiguring yourself. And that was a deep learning from us, seriously, watching you going through that.
We've had people since, we've published a paper based on your case, as you know, and we've had people kind of request the same protocol, and basically I don't think you can handle it. You got to start with the 5-day you did, and then we'll see how you handle that. Then maybe we'll get you to what Chris did, but that's not an ordinary man's protocol.
It's not.
And that's true. Yeah, to go to point A to point C, you took some steps, and that was a lot of chat with Jonathan, a lot of preparing with Jonathan. There was a lot of back and forward, for you to get there. But yeah, it wasn't easy, surely.
So what was it like having that much Ibogaine in you?
Well, before, so there's, examples of when you would give that much, but it's really hard to know. But I'm quite sure the first time that I went to Gabon, the amount of iboga that I ate was certainly in that territory. We were eating the strongest bark that I've ever encountered, and I had 72 grams of it. So just the calculation would have been somewhere between 4 and 10 times a flood dose. And so I know that you can do it. I know you can navigate it, but I do remember after that feeling like it's a huge thing to traverse. And I was so glad that when I went through that, I had the people around who had done it and integrate it into the ceremony, and the knowledge of the village was sort of surrounding that. So it was a big undertaking because you go a realm deeper. I think those are your words, like you said. It was a realm deeper, a realm stranger that you got into.
The journey goes on.
Yeah.
It's like it goes on.
Yes.
And it's exactly.
Yeah.
And it's I was going to ask you with the root bark, the total alkaloid, is that that has a longer duration in the system, doesn't it, than the Ibogaine itself, or is that
probably because of the alkaloids or
right.
other minerals and
right.
probably whatever is there adding to the
I mean,
to the nutrition's balance.
Right. And you're doing that. Are you doing it with others? Like how many others are you doing that with when you did that? That one try.
So, well, sir, what's the question?
How many others are the other people doing it at the same time as you?
Oh, there was 2 other people, but it was kind of like you described, being the director of a not-for-profit and kind of feeling like the responsibility. So like when I went there and I was doing that initiation, I was the director of the Global Ibogaine Therapy Alliance. So there was not as much a sense of responsibility on my side, but a sense of on their side of wanting and needing to show me something. So they kind of wanted me to have a big experience. But since then, like recently, I got the first Nagoya compliant export license from Gabon. And we're now working with a lab that's producing a total, like a full botanical drug. So it doesn't just have Ibogaine, it has all the alkaloid profile, but very purified. Like it's supposed to be just all the alkaloid material in the plant, nothing else. So a purified botanical drug. And what we found was we only need to give about 60% of the dose, even though, in the test batch we had 82% was Ibogaine, 82% of the mixture. And there was 94% total alkaloid, which means there's 82% Ibogaine, 12% other alkaloids. So, but we only have to give 60% of the dose. So what gives, like either something else in that 12% is way stronger than Ibogaine, or what we think is going on is there's something that is stopping or slowing the metabolism of Ibogaine, so that when you take it, it's not getting broken down very quickly, so it comes on quicker, it builds up to a higher peak, and it lasts a lot longer because you're not metabolizing it out. So in that case, it's shown us that, when you eat root bark, these other elements are in play. And so, you're having a longer exposure, which, I think you want to recover to the point where you can get up and move around and go throughout your day. After that, you do want the after effects to continue for as long as possible, because those are, very positive.
Yeah. So my situation, close to the house here, got an Airbnb. It's right adjacent to the beach for my treatment.
Yeah, we had a separate.
And that, I think it was day 2 or 3, day 3 probably, of being situated and getting the ramp up of the dosage for me. And with all of this too, it's like, I think I've already revealed the context of I'm willing to go whatever steps necessary to put the brakes on this. So if you did say somewhere like, we need to do like 2 months of this, I'd be like, let's just do it. Whatever, I'm willing to go in and because this works. But the going out, you said, well, let's experience. The beauty was you came in too with had some ritual work with me, which I deeply appreciate, and that anything that kind of connects and personalizes and gives it integrity and honor to the experience. I'm actually curious if any of the people, the Gabonese, had ever tried like a alkaloid, a refined alkaloid, like see what their experience compared to that the root bark would be like, just as a experiential context. But you said you can go out for a walk if you want to. And as in this half state of like some dosing in the morning, I think we slowly ramped up throughout the day. And it was quite a beautiful, used to previously wearing a mask and have my eyes closed. So you have a very internal visual experience, which amplifies the visuals. But going outside and seeing the sun and the Pacific Ocean and the stillness of the sea, it felt like I was traversing another planet, kind of. I mean, it was like an essence of like, it's familiar, but I'm in a different place. And also during this whole period too, like I was trying to catalog my pain experience on an hourly or half-hour basis, just quick notes to see where I was at, to see where the movement had went, which I did continually afterward too, I think for a couple of months. And it was just a great indicator of where I was at and what was happening. I remember at the end of the treatments, I felt like it was just gone. It was like I was so free of the pain, and revealing to you to go through these questionnaire questions with me. I think we did a series of sort of nerve pain type questionnaires. I think you recorded most of them, or recorded them, but it came down to this, like, when was the last time you felt any pain or something? And I was like, I don't know, I think it's been like, it was like a day or 2 days or whatever, 18 hours or whatever it was, but the realization that this hand was like at this place of just like the numbness was real, and it was like I was touching me without all this interference. It felt so like I would love any poor bastard that has this injury to know this from the onset of their injury and just deal with the challenges from physical limitations instead of being polluted by the nerve pain stuff. I mean, it's like if there's some way to evoke someone's experience of dealing with a trauma, it's like losing a child. I mean, I've never lost a child, I don't have kids, but your limb is part of your connectivity to life. It's a hand. And not only is it like a dead cat now kind of stapled to your shoulder, but it's like screaming nonstop. It's like, please let me heal from this loss. Like, stop this thing from like trying to annihilate me. And if someone could experience the healing from an injury that changes your connection to life without that torment, it's like it could be so much healthier. I don't know why I'm bringing this up. I'm just thinking the context. Because I experienced this, what it's like. I was like, holy fuck! Like, what would it be like to have this from the beginning? How much freedom would I have had? Because that's important. I mean, I wrote an article, 2007, I think, after the Stanford trials, and called "Pain: The Great Isolator." And it isolates you from things that you connect with, friends, family, loved ones, activities. It just separates, and it separates you from your own self. Like who you identify with, who you want to be, who you think you are. And in that context, it's like, if you're already walking over the hot fires, like I'll walk over whatever hot fires, if I can find a cure, not just for me, but hopefully open the door for others. And that's what I think, like the Ibogaine context. I was like, this is something. There's something working here. This is working. And it was like I would microdose afterward and fluctuating. And I went and traveled in Italy, went to a friend's wedding, and I felt so fucking normal. And it was like, why is this not fucking legal in the U.S.? Why is this not? It's like this has to stop. This has to stop. People don't deserve this life being pulled from them. They don't deserve it. At any rate, they surely don't deserve to have this organic, beautiful medicine that's available, provided by Mother Nature, bless you, to not be accessible to them, If there's questions on the research, did someone die of a heart attack because of the Ibogaine? Was it something else? Okay, well, let's figure that out. Let's see. But I think that day's coming. California was on the verge for months of getting rid of their psychedelic, or having psychedelic provider laws, which I was like, oh, phenomenal. It's been a great resource to me to know this is here. It's an escape hatch. because the surgery that they do for this injury, for the nerve pain, is it's high risk, and some people have great success. Some people commit suicide afterward, and it's like highly invasive. And my docs, the Mayo Clinic, still don't advocate. Like, don't do that. They don't do it. They won't advocate for it. But some docs are willing to do the risk of doing that because they know it's life or death for someone. It's great when it works, but it's not surefire. Anyway, just spelling out the heat of the circumstance for at least for people within my specific injury, but also amputees and other types of nerve pain and circumstances. I'd like to find out what the Dr. John Orney or University of Washington was doing those patents. Like, how did he step into that platform? What else did he find out that got him down that road?
Yeah, because he did it early on. But I mean, by the time we were writing up the paper, I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why that might work. Like, I mean, there's the similarity with the ketamine and the NMDA receptor antagonism. There's also sigma 2 receptor, which is a pretty new discovery. I think was like 2015 or something. So there's all kinds of mechanisms that we don't even really, we don't even know.
Everything is involved about the receptor theory.
Right.
Still,
yes.
It's still there. And this is opening another window. It is, like we was been saying before, it's more fundamental than just the receptor theory.
Yeah.
You know?
So, and we've been thinking, Ibogaine might help to drive our understanding of that. Because LSD was discovered right around the same time that serotonin was discovered. And it actually became part of the way that we started to look for receptors as modulators of the mind because of the similarity. It was one of the things that triggered somebody to look at if drugs were also binding to these receptors rather than just our endogenous neurotransmitters. So LSD helped to kind of push us in the direction of thinking about neurotransmitter theory. With Ibogaine, I think it might become part of a push to start to look beyond neurotransmitters into how at least Ibogaine seems to be crossing the cell membrane and has effects on the mitochondria, possibly the RNA, that there's some kind of structural benefit in the cell, and that might be part of why there's such long effects afterwards. But anyways, there's hopefully it can help us to understand better what the experience is.
What were your effects after that large saturation protocol? I think you continued microdosing afterwards, and where was the pain at, and
I think
how have you been? I think it's been almost a year or more since then. How's life been? What's happening?
So I microdosed probably for like three or 4 months in different varying levels, trying to find a sweet spot, which I was never able to fully get, and that was part of the challenge of coming down to Mexico, not being legal in the States, and having limited amounts of time and to try and modulate it. And basically, I wanted to go as high as a dose as possible before I started feeling effects, and then just drop down from there, and then continually drop down and to see what happened, like when the pain started happening.
Yeah, like you're trying to find the minimal effective dose. Yeah.
And that was a little bit of a dance. I mean, I think I got up to one point, 230 milligrams, maybe 250, where I was doing daily for a period without feeling any buzz, which was quite a high amount for microdosing. And then I started running out, so I'd titrate, and I'd go down to, I think, 10 milligrams. And the pain would sort of slowly creep in. And I got to a place where I felt hyperfunctional. I wasn't using Adderall to keep awake during the day. I was getting much better sleep. My heart rate was much lower. I was always freaking out. Like, I can't believe this is actually happening. Like, Like, I didn't know what was going on in the context of, was the heart rate lower because of pain reduction and sleep function, or was it having some sort of neuroconnectivity, regeneration happening in my vagus nerve, my neck. Because that's where the vagus runs right over the brachial plexus where all the nerves are torn out. And other nerves like the sternocleidomastoid on the side is gone, phrenic nerve to my right lung is gone. So it just made sense that nerve was also impeded or affected by it.
So the revelation there was that after the first treatment where you did a normal flood, taking those smaller doses afterwards was less and less helpful the further out you got from the treatment. After the second time, for months and months, you were able to manage the pain with those same smaller doses. So somehow there was something that had...
And I'd say, so the long-term effects were probably, when I got off everything over a period of time, it stayed at between 50% reduction to 25% reduction. And it was like this kind of little dance where, and I was like, should I just try? I was like, well, this is actually after I stopped microdosing altogether.
Oh, really? So even after
so
you
there's a long-term effect.
Yeah.
And that was,
wow.
That made me feel like there's an untapped resource. Like, I don't know what would have happened if I just kept on microdosing over a period of a year. Like, would it have this long-term effect of constant, like, sort of, because there's no side effects in the context, like any other of the medications I tried. Only if I'd stayed at below the psychedelic effect, there's no side effects. And that was extremely promising to me.
No.
So in the end result was that a guy with my injury that actually had treatments here, but I think for addiction, or maybe he was using, he had the same injury. Uh-huh. He had spoken to me about stem cell treatments. He went, even though like 9 months after Putin invaded.
Yeah, he just went to Kiev. He was in that. That was the level of kind of desperation.
And his pain's gone.
He was at.
I mean, this fetal stem cells, which are specifically the difference with fetal stem cells is you're talking what's the exact right term? Stem cells for the nervous system, essentially.
Yeah, they're like downstream enough to turn into neuron cells, right?
Yeah, they're differentiated into neurons, so they're actually extracting from the spinal cord and brain capacity of the fetus.
Right.
And that can't be something that can be produced yet outside the lab. Neural stem cells, essentially.
Right.
And that's like the holy grail for nervous system. Yeah,
so like placental, umbilical stem cells, none of these can differentiate into neurological cells. So even though that there's treatments and you can do really high doses of stem cells, and stem cells help with all kinds of things with these kind of neurological conditions, Kiev I believe it's one of the only places in the world. Like they've, in terms of being pioneers, they've been
at it for 30 plus years.
Yeah, they're the experts there.
Yeah, and there's other case studies of people with my injury getting resolution with that years ago. That's why I initially went. But the context of me going was because I couldn't continue using Ibogaine because it's not legal in the U.S. Yeah. I even went down roads of trying to get root bark and trying to have someone distill it for me and things like that. Chemists that were trying to help me out, and it didn't pan out, didn't complete. And I always felt like it was a back pocket resource I was going to try and do. And after this, one buddy with the injury went to Ukraine. I was like, screw it, that's what I'm going to do. And I had this protocol that I already set up, and I actually went and did that. During wartime, went 4 times in and out. I stayed in Europe for 3 months, trying to live as cheaply as possible. And it had a 5-month resolve of my nerve pain. It slowly ramped up and did its effect, and then slowly pain just started escalating back again. And it stayed at this point where I'd say it's 50% pre-treatment here. And that's something that's, it's actually can feel quite a lot more normal. I mean, life is a lot better. But part of me is like, I just want to finish a job. I'm not saying I can expect to have 100%, but if I can still kick back another 25% of that, it would just give me, I mean, it's very tolerable.
Well, yeah, any
It's very
relief.
tolerable right now.
Yeah.
Tolerable is not. It's very effective, manageable. It's good. The pain is tolerable. I guess what I mean.
Yeah. So your story, we took our sweet time writing it up just because sometimes it takes a while, but it got published in Frontiers in Pain Medicine. I just realized we kept saying the word frontier here and there.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So
That's right.
Got published in
Nice.
Frontiers in Pain Research.
Thank you.
And we wanted to get it out there. I really do believe that your ability to tolerate pain and discomfort probably made that treatment more tolerable,
More manageable. Yeah.
more manageable than it would be for a lot of people. Like, I mean,
Sure.
doing that,
But I
like
think-
we said, it wouldn't be an entry level.
Maybe, but I think also the pain. It's from hard knocks. It's a school of hard knocks in that sense.
Yeah.
I mean, it may have had some levels before that at least validated to me my ability to tolerate or deal with pain previously, but.
What I'll say though is when we've worked with people who have pain, but not at the same level that you're describing, like what you're describing is really severe. I was always really impressed when you were talking about the homunculus model of just how much the whole sensation of phantom pain where somebody has an amputation is able to feel the limb and to feel the pain still in that limb even when it's after it's been amputated is a pretty clear indication of just how much our brains have this mental model of our bodies and that our sensation is based on this mental model right and that homunculus model is basically how much of the pain sensation registers from every part of the body. So like when the model has massive lips because our lips are so sensitive.
It's built in ratio to the sensory capacity.
Yeah.
So the lips are massive, the hands are very massive.
Hands are huge.
The feet have some size. The sexual organs have some size.
Right.
Like the hips and legs and back, there's like over skinny, scrawny, but blown out. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, the level of pain that you're experiencing is
for
extreme.
the sensory, for the sense of sensation, it's the hands dominate. I mean, they're the largest parts of our that homunculus, the representation of sensory capacity. It's I mean, there's a book written by a neurosurgeon about the development of the human mind. It's based on our hands, and he's a neurosurgeon. He operates brains, so he's a brain surgeon. In the context of the actual design of our hands and how it's developed the brain and the use of it, and how much the brain is like, how much sensation is in this, is how we connect to the world around us, is how we feed ourselves, how we connect with each other predominantly, and that makes sense. When one is damaged or fucked up or in fire, it's just gonna short circuit that much more of your being.
Yeah. So when we've done treatments with people who have pain but not at that level, we haven't needed to go to such extreme measures in order to see a resolution or like a treatment effect, right? So, but recently with that paper that's been out there, we did hear of somebody else who had a really intense injury. We weren't involved in the treatment, so we didn't have an opportunity to ask them about what level the pain was, but
that was a colleague of mine in Vancouver. He was a physician who had referred people to me, or at least one person to me, for drug detox while I was operating in Vancouver. And he's South African, but lives in Canada. And he reached out one day and said, "Do you know if Ibogaine helps with pain?" And I was able to say, actually, here's this paper that has been recently published. And he's like, "Wow, my brother is going through something very similar to this." Wow. And they basically took that paper which you inspired. Thank you. It has now helped at least one other person. And they went to an Ibogaine provider in South Africa and basically ran through the protocol that was mapped out there. And he is still overjoyed with the pain relief. He can't believe it.
Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, it's like these invisible shackles. It really is like you're being released out of prison, which I've never experienced that, but it's seriously, and at the deepest respect. I have my own personal love of science and curiosity, and my own sort of just innate. I love seeing how things work, and the willingness to go through all the work and effort to publish the paper. That's not easy. I mean, all the continual questionnaires that you'd always be willing to call me and talk it over. I was like, wow, dude, thank you. I mean, always just thank you both. It just your willingness to work with what you do with the vets that come in for treatment for the brain injury and for the PTSD. It's like putting together research enables others to, step off that platform. We can go further and further. It just really makes a difference. It's what I've learned with my injury. Data is everything. It's everything. One thing I never said was when I had surgery, right before I went under, I knew every nerve connected to my muscles, the ones that were connected, the ones that weren't, new ones are going to be innervated from other muscles. There's going to be a bunch of muscles that I'd never see again. If they're not going to get connected now, they're gone for life. And one of them was my tricep. Even though my arm has, it's going to have limited function and maybe not enough to really use the tricep, I was like, if there's a way to save that muscle, I want to innervate it. And so I basically just took one surgery that you use to innervate the bicep, taking part of the ulnar nerve, and asked them, said, can you do this Oberlin procedure to my tricep? Right before I go under, and the docs at the Mayo Clinic, we're already innervating the bicep, like they thought, which is the Oberlin does. And the other doctors, no, he said tricep. Anyway, long and short of it is, because of it pushed, they innervated my tricep. I pushed it to do it, but it took them 14 years of enough patience to write a paper on it. And they finally published it. Now it's out there, but that 14 years, you know how many triceps that didn't get innervated because other doctors didn't know how to do it? And your willingness to do that, I'm your first patient, and you went in and wrote a paper on it. Of course, other physicians will go, oh, it's only a case of one. But you already got a first-hand result. Someone's willing to take the step and do it. It's like you don't have to wait till you get 100 patients. You got one that's, it's just, it's beautiful. So thank you for that.
Yeah, that's what a case study is. It's to show, there's something here, and, it's not a clinical trial. It would require further investigation, but it was an opportunity for us to learn something new. And, obviously we got to see, John Oldney's patent out there, but other than that, there was nothing else. So, and it's all about data because that is communicating. And so, the paper's out there. I would always tell people, go and read the patient's perspective section because your story and your whole history with pain was so fascinating. But I think, what you've described here today too is maybe a more complete version of that, but it's shocking, it's intense. And, you've been on a huge hero's journey with this. So, yeah.
And papers are cool. And if people do want to find that, they can Google it. They'll be able to find that pretty easy. But what's even cooler these days is podcasts. Yeah. And just you being willing to drive down and speak with us about all of this. I'm sure this is going to help even more lives. So thank you so much, Chris, for all you've been through. It truly is the hero's journey. You have kind of, every step of the way that I've known you, you have been a hero on this journey. And we're just super grateful for you, man.
Likewise. I mean, you guys are my heroes. I mean, your willingness to breach into the unknown and then put your hands out and say, I can help you if you want to take that step.
Yeah, let's go.
Thank you sincerely.
Right on.
Let's do it. Awesome. Well, that was a wonderful time. Well spent. So thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much, Chris. Really good seeing you. Sorry I couldn't see you in person, but I'm sure it'll happen again.
Yeah. Love you.
All right. Take care, everybody. See you next time.